Welcome to Uniquely Qualified. I'm your friend and host, Liz Ficken, and I'm so glad you're here. Uniquely Qualified is a podcast that empowers guests to share their experience, strength, and hope in overcoming challenges in the spirit of mutual healing. We hope that you'll leave feeling more aware, connected, and supported in navigating the human experience. Today's episode contains discussion of infertility and birth. Please engage with this content in a way that feels best to you. So let's just first ground ourselves in some data and research before I introduce today's guest. Many of us are familiar with the term infertility, but the Cleveland Clinic defines it as a condition where you can't get pregnant after 1 year of trying to conceive. Infertility is a condition of your reproductive system that causes people to be unable to get pregnant/conceive. Infertility can affect anyone and has many causes. And now I'll just offer up some quick stats from the National Institute of Health. About 9% of men and about 11% of women of reproductive age in the United States have experienced infertility problems. And then this next set of data I think is really interesting and compelling. In 1/3 of infertile couples, the problem is the man. In 1/3 of infertile couples, the problem can't be identified or is with both partners, the man and woman. And then the last third is women. So it's equally divided. A third men, a third both or can't be identified, and a third women. Studies suggest that after 1 year of having unprotected sex, 12 to 15% of couples are unable to conceive, and after 2 years, 10% of couples still have not had a live born baby. In couples younger than age 30 who are generally healthy, 40 to 60% are able to conceive in the first 3 months of trying. Fertility declines with age in both men and women, but the effects of age are much greater in women. In our 30s, women are about half as fertile as they are in our early 20s, and women's chance of conception declines significantly after age 35. But also, male fertility declines with age, although it's a little more gradual. I hope that after listening to today's episode, listeners will have a better understanding of what it's like to grapple with this issue and how the healthcare and health insurance systems in the United States do and do not support people struggling to conceive. And with that, I am happy to introduce today's guest, my new friend, Ashlee. Ashlee, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Liz. Thank you so much for having me. So excited to be here.
I'm just so excited to have you. I think we have some really important things to share with our listeners
I
today.
think we do.
Yeah. So, listeners, let me just share some fun facts about Ashlee with you. She lives in Illinois with her husband, daughter, her 2 horses, and dog. She's very well educated, multiple degrees that I will describe now. She has her Bachelor of Science in Biology and Chemistry from Hillsdale College and has 2 master's degrees. She has earned her Master of Science in Equine Science from Michigan State University and her Master's of Science in Regulatory Affairs from Johns Hopkins University. You can usually find Ashlee doing something related to horses, fitness, or family when she's not managing Oakwood Farms, an equestrian facility that offers horse boarding. So, Ashlee, how are you uniquely qualified?
I'm uniquely qualified to talk about fertility and struggles to get pregnant. And as I'm saying that, actually, it feels weird to say I'm uniquely qualified because I'm not unique. I wish it was. I wish I was the only person in the world that ever had to do this, but the statistics are getting worse every year. And now it seems used to be 1 in 8 people were uniquely qualified to talk about this. Now it's 1 in 6 couples. So,
Oh my
I'm just
goodness.
one of the millions of women out there who have had to go through this and excited to share what I've discovered.
Yeah, thank you. That is one thing that I hope listeners hear, that if anybody is struggling with this or has struggled with this, you are not alone. Ashlee is living proof of that, and we're using the uniquely qualified lens to hear her specific story and journey, and I'm again really eager to get into it.
Super. Thank you so much, Liz. I'm excited.
Yeah. Yeah. So before we start getting to our main topic, I would love to do my usual, if there's fertility or baby or family involved, the origin story.
Yeah.
So will you please share with us how you met your husband?
Yes, of course. So I went straight from Hillsdale College to Michigan State when I started my master's degree. And it's interesting because the stage of life that I was in actually contributed to some of our fertility struggles, which
Oh,
it'll
interesting.
all come together in the end. But
Yeah.
so at the time I was like really struggling to get through my master's program. And I started going to the gym like pretty obsessively, I would say. And I
Mm-hmm.
ended up meeting my husband there. So it was, somewhat of a happy ending. But,
Yeah.
I kind of fell into some very disordered eating habits and it got a little
Mm-hmm.
bit dark. But I met my husband throughout all this and he really helped pull me out of that. But
Oh,
so
good.
we met at the gym
Mm-hmm.
and he was this like tall, dark, handsome, beautiful man with this like ridiculously long beard. I was like, oh, I like saw him from across the room and I literally walked up to him and was like, hey, are like trying to shoot my shot. Like, "Hey, are you using this piece of equipment?" And he kind of just like looked at me like blankly and was like, no, like go ahead. No. And I didn't need to use that piece. It was a rowing machine. I did not need to use the rower, but I was like, I just want to talk to the guy.
Yeah.
And I had to ask a friend who lived in the area who he was, because I would never have guessed that his name was Nemanja. I was like
Mm.
trying to stalk like the gym's Instagram page to see if he like had liked the picture. I really wanted to date this guy. Uh,
Yes.
so I finally got his information and I asked him on a date.
Let's
And
go.
girls rule the world. So I asked him out and we went bowling.
That's
And
really cute.
yeah, I don't drink, but I was so nervous. I also don't drink whiskey sours, but I had a whiskey sour because I guess that's what I was feeling that night. And I did horrible at bowling. The rest was history. Like we were inseparable from that day forward. And then we ended up moving to Nebraska together and then we got married and here we are today.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. So all the way back to college.
All the way back to college. So, just quick timeline. So, you're out of college, and then what year do you get engaged and then married?
Okay, so we meet in 2014 and then I graduated with my master's in 15. We moved like now that I'm looking at it, I'm like, man, this guy had a lot of faith in this relationship just moving to Nebraska with me. So we moved to Nebraska in the fall of 15. So we'd only been
Mm-hmm.
dating like maybe 8 or 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
And we moved in together in a new state that we've both never lived in. We
Mm-hmm.
got engaged in 2017 and then we got married in 2018.
Great. And so we're recording this in December 2024. You all
Yeah.
have been together a while.
Yeah, 10 years. Yeah.
That's great. You're building a life together.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think that like a third of our life we've been together. It's pretty wild. Yeah. And a lot
Yeah.
happened in that third too. So,
Yeah. Sounds
uh,
like it.
we've worked to create something pretty solid. He's a good guy. He makes it easy. He's a very good man. So,
Oh, I love to hear that. So you get married. What was the plan? What was the discussion with you two about family stuff? Was this like,
yeah.
were you both always, we want to be parents, or
It's
talk
like
to me
part
about
of the
that
story. Yeah.
discussion?
So this is part of the story where things are like different for us than I think they are for many couples.
Okay.
Um, so when we met and I was like going to the and I say going to the gym, that's like a very we I was actually competitively bodybuilding and that world is like very intense. It can be very obsessive and
Hmm.
a very dark place, but I was in a dark place too. So it was kind of helping me. I
Yeah.
was competitively bodybuilding too. But unfortunately, I think that over time, there's this condition called hypothalamic amenorrhea, which is basically, I mean, you've heard of like gals that are like Olympic level athletes losing their periods when they get like to really low body fat levels, or
Yeah.
well,
Yep.
that's effectively what that is, hypothalamic amenorrhea.
Oh, okay.
And typically, when your body fat levels come back up to a normal healthy range, you
Hmm.
will get your period back. I never got mine back. So
Oh,
from
okay.
age 22 until, I mean, now I still don't have a period. So like for a solid 10 years, I just was not menstruating.
Mm,
So we knew this. Like, so I knew this was happening and I had actually so I was under the guidance of a reproductive endocrinologist before I was even engaged, before Nemanja and I were
hmm.
married, before we were trying to have kids, because we were trying to correct this problem. When we got married, and when I say my husband is a good man, I mean like he wanted a soccer team. And I did too, right? But
Hmm.
we had to have this conversation of like, you're marrying me knowing that this might not happen. And he used to say to me all the time, if you is as good as it gets, then I'm okay with that. My God, you're just the best guy.
Of-
So he was like so understanding, so supportive. And I think like he's just like such a godly man and so rooted in
mm,
faith. And I think he just knew that like everything is gonna work out the way it's supposed to work out. You're my person and we're gonna figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
So we together started trying to figure things out. We started taking the infertility stuff a little bit more seriously when we got engaged in 2017. And I think that's when we started to realize, like, oh shit, like this actually might. I think in the very beginning, you always assume it's going to turn out
Mm,
well.
yeah.
Because that's what you see on the internet. Like everybody's IVF success stories, and you always, it's the Amazon Prime of a baby, and you're going to leave happy. And then you kind of get in the trenches of it, and you're like, oh shit, like,
Yeah.
this might not end with my Cinderella story. So
Hmm.
he and I both knew before we got married that we were going to struggle with this. We didn't know the extent to which we'd struggle because I still like we didn't have a firm diagnosis and we were still trying to figure out what was happening.
Hmm.
So yeah, that was in like 2017. Once we got married, then we actually started having like unprotected sex and like actually trying for a
Hmm.
baby. Everyone has their unsolicited advice of like, oh, maybe if you just go on vacation or if
Oh.
you have a couple drinks and relax. And I'm like, that is really wonderful advice. I wonder if we tell that to people who need insulin to survive or have cancer. Like, hey, maybe if you
Oh.
just relax a little bit, it'll
Oh
happen.
man.
It didn't happen. So yeah, we started trying very organically, just let's see what happens and hope for the best. And very low pressure. And, over time, it just never happened.
Mhm.
And he always jokes 1,000 shots on goal, one baby. So it was many, many, many years. And again, some people are actively trying for 10 years. We just
Mhm.
kind of pulled the goalie and tried to see what would happen.
Yeah.
And then over time, not much was going on, but there was this like beacon of hope. When we were on our honeymoon of all places, we were in the Amalfi Coast of Italy, and we're walking up this staircase. I'm in like a white jumper, and we're walking up the staircase, and I'm like, oh my God, I think I'm getting my period right now. And I like run, and of course we're in Italy, where like you have to pay to use the bathroom, and there's like not a tampon machine, like it's not a Walmart. So I run into a store, and I'm like, "Hey, do you guys have a bathroom?" Like I'm visibly bleeding through my pants,
Oh my
and
gosh.
I was so excited. This is the most ridiculous.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. And I'm like, oh my God, God was just waiting for us to get married so that, like, of course, I'm
Oh.
like creating the story in my head of why the divine timing was so perfect. And so it
Yeah.
kind of gave me something to hold on to. And I'm like, all right,
Yeah.
maybe there's this thread I can pull, like, and follow this through. Like, maybe I'm not broken and I can actually
Mm.
start trying to investigate what's happening here. So the fact that my body could do what it was supposed to do one time was enough for me to like cling on to that and be like, all right,
Yeah.
like let's fucking go. Like let's figure out what's happening here. And that's kind of what started it all. And we like put our heads down, we started our research, and that was what launched us into like full blown infertility. And it kind of never stopped. And obviously until now. But
Yeah. Well, I love this. I love this. Just keep on going. What
okay.
happens
Yeah.
next after? And also, what a dream honeymoon
It
location.
was great.
I'm
It was
sorry.
great.
I'm just
No,
like
yeah,
take me
no, it
there
was
right
so
now.
wonderful. Yeah, it was
The
wonderful.
Amalfi
My
Coast.
husband, he was born and raised in like former Yugoslavia. We started off in like the coast of Croatia, where he's from,
Oh,
and I got to like meet
beautiful.
his grandmother and all his family that still lives over there. And then we
Oh,
ended.
so
Yeah,
sweet.
it was great. It was really wonderful. So it was like, of course, like this when you say like it's a honeymoon from like all honeymoons, like I could never have
Yeah.
imagined something so perfect. I get my period. This is amazing. Holy smokes, all of my dreams are coming true. We're gonna go home and make a baby. So, yeah, it didn't quite work out that way. So, by this time, again, like I said, because I got my period, I was like, all right, well, my body's clearly healing. It
Mm.
had been the last competition that I had done was in April of 2017. So, it had been, and I got married in
Okay.
August of 18. So, it had been, say, 18 months since the last show I did. And I had gained a considerable amount of weight since then. And I was like, all right, maybe it's just my body took more time to get back to homeostasis. And, I'm just going to cut myself a break.
Yeah.
And that was like the only period that I got. So it ended
Okay.
up, but I still was like clinging on to it because again, I'm a scientist and I'm like, all right, well, there has to be something here. Like if my body can do it once, then it can do it again. Like
Right.
I have all the pieces and parts.
Mhm.
And that is kind of what started that. So then I started worrying, maybe I don't have all the pieces and parts. So I started off, we're living in Tampa, and I started off at I don't know that I should name the clinics
Okay.
I have nothing nice to say about them, so I don't know
Okay.
that I should name them. Um
if we have listeners in Tampa that are curious about it,
Yes,
then they can reach out to me and we can
absolutely.
give you the dish.
Absolutely.
You don't have to say the name now.
I will say there's one doctor whose name I will mention because he was just the
Okay.
most wonderful guy in the world. So this
Mm,
all starts, and I'm working at a company called Medi Weight Loss in downtown Tampa. Our like chief medical for the organization just happened to be a reproductive endocrinologist.
oh.
And he was the one that I had been working with before we got engaged, before we got married. I don't know how we ever got on the topic because you don't typically tell your coworkers that you don't have a menstrual cycle. I didn't know. I mean, it was a weight loss company, so I would never have imagined that he had any, that he ran a fertility clinic. And we
Mm,
somehow got to talking about it. And this man would like do private consults with me, like in his office at work, so that like I wouldn't have to go to the clinic and get billed. I mean, he was just the best guy. He ordered all of the tests. I mean, his name is Dr. Ed Zabella, just the best and greatest guy. And he really helped us kind of get started, point us in the right direction. He was retired from his practice, so
mm.
I wish I could have gone and seen him and done everything with him. He pointed us in the right direction, kind of got us started, and then we got married and kept moving on. So we went to a new clinic in Clearwater,
Okay.
and I really did not like this doctor. So
Oh.
I walk in for my consultation. Like, so this is the first time I've ever met this man. He doesn't know my story. I'm there with my mom, which I'm thinking back on it. I don't know why I wasn't there with my husband, but I'm there with my mom. And I walk in and we're talking about the like origin of the hypothalamic amenorrhea. And he says something to the tune, and I wish I could like verbatim remember how he put it, but it was
Mhm.
like, don't try not to beat yourself up that it's like that you damaged your body so badly that you can't give your husband a child. Like that was kind of the vibe. And
Whoa.
and I'm sitting there and I was like, well, that never crossed my mind before until you said it. Like I had never thought of that before. He's like, well, like lots of women battle with eating disorders and like it's not your fault. Like don't and I'm thinking like I never thought it was my fault. Like thanks for putting that in my head now. So then that was like a little nugget that I kind of like clung on to for a long time and felt like a lot of guilt because of him. So obviously I never went back. He was the one who told me that IVF was the quote Amazon Prime to baby. Like that is literally what he called it. Which for all the listeners out there that have gone through IVF, you all can attest that that is like not at all how it goes. Wish it was the Amazon Prime. That would make life so much easier, but it certainly is not. And I think that he was selling false hope to very vulnerable, grief-stricken, desperate, kids who wanted their baby, and I never went back. So I went for my consultation in the state of Florida. Well, we can dive into insurance later, but in the state of Florida, there's no requirement for employers to offer fertility coverage in their insurance packages. So that consultation was out of pocket and cost me $500. And I never went back.
Yeah.
So then I went to a new clinic in Brandon, Florida, on the other side of Tampa. And this clinic I liked a little bit better. But again, and I'm sure I'm the most obnoxious patient to deal with because I'm a scientist and like I try to root everything that I do, every decision that I make in data. I consume as much data as possible because I feel like it pulls emotions out of things and I make better
Yes.
decisions when I'm not emotional, right? Um,
Yes.
so I go to this clinic, and this is where I started to see like the darkness involved in the insurance piece of all this and like the medical world, like the billing, the coding. I think there's a lot of nefarious activity there. So this doctor started to peel back the layers of the onion a little bit more. Like, hey, why is this happening? I don't think it's appropriate to call it idiopathic if I'm not getting a period, right? I'm a 28-year-old woman. I mean, for all intents and purposes, I'm healthy. I don't have any pre-existing conditions. I did have, a bout of time where I was underweight, but other than that, I'm not struggling with any chronic health conditions. There's really no reason for me to not be menstruating. That's not normal.
Hmm.
So this doctor starts ordering the menagerie of tests, right? My dad is a neurosurgeon, and he had mentioned that he has seen quite a few women my age having pituitary adenomas, I think they're called, where like you
Oh,
have a
okay.
small tumor on your pituitary gland and that changes your prolactin levels and you have it plucked out and then like boom, you get pregnant. And I'm like, oh my God, I hope I have this brain tumor. I've never prayed for a brain tumor in my
Oh
life.
my God.
How great would that be if that was the problem and they just pluck it out? Well, my whole hormone panel is totally normal. So I mean, not just normal, but like ideal. Like they do the full hormone panel, everything's normal. So then my question is like, okay, well, if everything's normal, why am I not bleeding? Like, why
Yeah.
don't? So they do, on my dad's request, they do the MRI of my head anyways, just to be sure. Sure enough, no brain tumor. Thank the Lord. I was praying for it, but no brain tumor, brain is healthy, great. So then they move into, all right, all of your hormone levels are normal. They got like pretty in depth with the hormone panel, beyond just like the like standard what an OB would order. They get into thyroid and went pretty deep. Excuse me. And all the while, I do want to mention they were neglecting doing anything with my husband. No one ever even asked for a sperm analysis, nothing. So like I was immediately, I think because I wasn't getting a period, they were focused on me, but never once did they ever
Okay. Yeah.
question my husband.
And how
Um,
much time had gone by at that point?
This was probably like 2019, so maybe like a year or two.
Okay. So at a point where, based on my little bit of research, not as a scientist or a medical professional, but enough to know that you should probably look at both partners,
Yeah,
even
yeah.
if
I
one
mean,
person is presenting something that could be symptomatic.
100%, 100%.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
finally did find a doctor who picked up on that. But
Okay.
excuse me, I'm sorry, I have a little bit of a cough.
All good.
Oh yeah, the second doctor was a little bit better, and he did start ordering all the right tests. So then he said, "All right, well, your hormone panels look pretty ideal. You're in good shape. You don't have PCOS. You're not overweight. Everything looks very strong. What I'm concerned about now is maybe we have either genetic anomalies or you have some type of like physiological abnormality. So like something isn't right with your anatomy." So at that point, we did and this was a nail biter waiting for this, but we did some genetic testing because he thought that like maybe I wasn't a woman. And that was terrifying. I am, spoiler alert. There are some conditions where you can have a third chromosome on your sex genome,
Oh yeah.
and that can have effects on your fertility. There's a ton of I wish that a silent X mutation. There was a couple different things that they tested me for. All of them came
Yeah.
back. So he's like, all right,
Okay.
genetically, there's nothing of concern here either. So like let's dive into anatomy. So that's when we started doing the hysterosalpingogram and the water sonogram, and the proper name is not coming to my brain right now, but all of the menagerie of tests where they're trying to like image all of your internal organs to make sure everything's working. So the hysterosalpingogram was the one where I got like a front row seat to how fucked up the insurance piece of this was.
Okay.
So I mentioned Florida does not have coverage for infertility treatment, or that's not correct. Florida does not require that companies offer insurance plans with fertility coverage. So it doesn't mean they don't have them. Just like your employer is not required to offer it to you.
Okay.
So of course mine doesn't. But I scoured. I mean, like I got the booklet for my insurance and I read every single line of it, trying to find some loophole because the cost associated with I mean, it's unimaginable.
Hmm.
At the
Hmm.
average, I mean, we're talking about just normal everyday people that are dealing with this kind of stuff, and no one has $50,000 sitting in the bank to go figure.
Mm-mm.
So
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? We're gonna find some type of loophole, and we kind of did. So the language stated that the infertility itself was like the infertility and treatment itself is not covered, but investigation as to defining the underlying cause of the infertility was, which I can appreciate because if my organs are not functioning properly, that really has nothing to do with infertility. Like there are a lot of secondary issues to amenorrhea, which I keep mentioning just means absence of menses. If you don't,
Okay.
huge increase in your likelihood of developing ovarian cancer, uterine cancer, breast cancer. Women who don't ovulate, women who have amenorrhea or anovulatory infertility have a huge risk of that. So I mean,
Mm.
it made sense that like we should be investigating this whether or not I'm trying to get pregnant. This is still important.
Right. Right.
So that's how I found out that my HSG should be covered. And I call at the time, I can't remember what insurance carrier I had, but I called them and I was like, hey, this is my story. This is what's happening. I need to get this hysterosalpingogram. And they were like, yeah, we agree. Like, you should definitely do that. It's covered under this language. Definitely go ahead and do it. So I basically started off the pre-authorization on my own. I get to the clinic. I've already scheduled it. And effectively what they do, it's like an x-ray and they are injecting like a dye into your cervix to like highlight your uterus and your fallopian tubes, and it's like a live x-ray, so they're doing it while they're watching it. instead of like just one picture.
Uh-huh.
And they want to see the dye come out of the ends of your fallopian tube to demonstrate that it's open, right? That if your
Mm-hmm.
egg releases, it has somewhere to go. So that's the test that I'm getting ready to go into. And I'm sitting there in the waiting room and I get up to the desk. And again, because Florida doesn't have a requirement for insurance coverage, most people in the state are paying out of pocket. So I think they just assume that most of their clientele are gonna be self-pay. So I get up there and the gal behind the desk says, "Hey, just so you know, like you have to pay before we'll do the procedure." And I was like, "Well, no, because you're gonna bill my insurance, right? Like I'm happy to pay my copay or whatever it is that I owe you
Yeah.
to pay, but I mean, you're gonna bill my insurance." And she was like, "Well, no, I see here that you're a self-pay patient." And I was like, "Oh, I am." I mean, this went on for I missed the appointment. This went on for like 30 minutes. And I was like, "Okay, here's the deal. I already called them. They were very clear about the language in my booklet. They told
Mm-hmm.
me that this was 100% going to be covered and, at whatever the rate is, my copay excluded. And this nurse, again, I'm not going to mention the name of this clinic because I think it was so unethical the way they did it. She gets on the phone with me and basically tells me that the price that they have offered me is the self-pay price. And if I refuse to pay it and ask them to send it through to insurance, that I forfeit the ability to get that rate. And now they're going to just bill insurance for whatever it is that they typically would charge. Basically, they're saying, "Hey, because you're a self-pay patient, we give you a discount. If you choose not to take that discount and you want us to submit to insurance, it's a different price. And if insurance says no, now you're saddled with that bill." And the price difference was enormous. So it was an
Oh my
$800
gosh.
procedure. And she said, "Well, we typically bill insurance for like $4,000. So if insurance denies it, you're going to be responsible for that $4,000." And I was like, "All right, that's fine. Go for it." And then she got into telling me that they could like decouple CPT codes, which they can't. And my dad's a surgeon and my mom was his medical biller for like 30 years. I'm calling them and I'm like, "Guys, is this legal?" Like, this is all happening in the waiting room. I'm like hysterically crying. There's other people in this waiting room. And I felt bad because I'm causing a scene. But like, I knew what I was entitled to. I mean, we pay a
Yeah.
huge premium for our insurance every single
Mm-hmm.
month. I'm not leaving until someone explains to me why I'm not eligible. A month passes, the insurance claim goes through, insurance pays for the entire thing. I never got a bill. But here's the thing, if you don't make a stink, they will keep pushing on you. Like they're going
Yeah.
to take you for a ride because again, we are the vulnerable population of
Mm-hmm.
sad, grief-stricken women who will do anything to take home our baby. And like in that
Mm-hmm.
moment, I just was like, "No, fuck this. I'm not letting you take me for a ride and I'm going to put my foot down." And it
Mm-hmm.
worked. So that was when I kind of had my eyes open to like, oof, I was right. And I wonder how many other times I had been right and just didn't fight for myself or didn't advocate for myself. How many thousands of dollars I shouldn't have spent on something or another. And that was the last time I went to that clinic. I got the procedure. It turned out fine. My tubes were open. Everything was great. The doctor looked super peeved. Didn't care. I left and I went to a new clinic. So at this point, we were approaching COVID. So
Okay.
this was like when I'm thinking of timeline, this was probably like fall of 19 or so. So at this time, I'm like, all right, my husband and I had started to make plans to start snowbirding between Illinois and Tampa.
Mm-hmm.
That was our new big plan. So we found a new clinic in Illinois. So both of my sisters went through IVF and
Okay.
they both used the same clinic in Illinois. And I was like, all right, well, and they both have the same doctor and they both have children. So I was like, all right, this worked
Yeah.
out for them. Maybe I should go there. So we come back to Illinois and with the like sole purpose of like, we're going to start coming back here so that we can see this new doctor. And, my family farm is up here. So this will give us something else to focus on.
Mm-hmm.
So we come up to Illinois. Now we're on our third clinic. And I liked this doctor very much. And I liked her clinic and I thought that she was wonderful. She continued to dig a little bit deeper. Still never had anything to do with my husband, never did any testing with him. But this was around the time when I started getting frustrated that every test that there was to order had been done.
Yeah.
And I was not concerned that I was not getting pregnant. That was not, and I couldn't get that through to like 95% of the doctors I was talking to. Like getting pregnant to me or my infertility is like a symptom of what's happening here. Like my body isn't working right. At this point, I'm probably 29, 30. I'm a 30-year-old woman who has all of my biological parts fully functional. All of my hormone panels are totally normal. I've had all of my genomic properties are totally normal. Someone tell me why I'm not menstruating. Like this isn't normal. This is not healthy. Like something is off here.
Yeah.
So at this point, like I kind of diverted into like getting pregnant was no longer the sole objective. Like I wanted answers for my health.
Yeah.
That in when you go to these clinics, it's kind of like a cattle call. And you come in, they give you your injections, they do your follicle monitoring, they, give you your trigger shot and send you on your way. And if you don't get pregnant, you do it again. That was not enough for me. Like I wanted answers as to why, because the stakes are high when you're doing this. Like it's not just money. There's like an emotional toll to this. Like even if you
Hmm.
had all the money in the world, you can't do all the cycles in the world. Like it takes a piece of you with it every
Hmm.
time it fails. And I'm like, I can't keep doing this forever. So why don't we get laser focused on what's wrong with me? And that way we'll have a better treatment plan once we understand what we're dealing with. That's not a lot of
Yeah.
in the industry. So this doctor, I did like her. Um, I ended up doing my first IUI in her practice. And this is where things like continued to get weird for me. So there's a lot of options when you start doing IUIs. I had
Do you
already
mind
done.
defining that, by the way,
Yeah, I'm
IUI?
sorry. I'm sorry. I don't do that. I'm like nose blind basically to the whole thing because I know it so intimately. I forget that other people don't.
I'm sure
Um,
other people are like, "Oh, Liz, how do you not know that?" But
no,
we're
no,
getting into
no.
some medical stuff where like I don't know. I don't know.
I think that's so important. I'm sorry.
No, you're
So
good. You're so good.
can you stop me if I'm using like jargon that is not, layman to our listeners. So IUI is a intrauterine insemination. So effectively
Okay.
what they do is they take dad's sperm, they spin it down and wash it so that they have like the best quality sperm, and then they basically like turkey baster it. So you have several options when you do IUIs. You can just, if you're a woman who naturally ovulates and you have a typical normal cycle, you can just time it with your normal cycle and do like at home LH strip testing, which like helps you to understand when you're ovulating. Or you can use a very popular drug that people use is Clomid, which I call like the gateway drug to, I mean, you do one round of Clomid and like you're hooked, like you're never going to stop. But so you can use Clomid, which they prescribe a lot for IUIs and also for timed intercourse, which sometimes they'll offer before you're doing an IUI, where they'll add the Clomid just to help you ovulate a little bit stronger, quote.
And when you
And
call it a gateway drug, do you like feel good, or is it just an empowering
that's a
thing
lot of.
where,
I think that it's like once you try it, no, you don't feel good. It's terrible,
oh,
actually.
okay,
I'm
okay, just making sure.
no, I'm like a horrible human being on Clomid. I hated it so bad. Uh,
Okay,
like it's like the first thing that you do really
got
typically
it.
if you present to an infertility clinic, the first thing they'll probably do is offer you like letrozole or Clomid.
Okay,
Like if you're anovulatory, just like try to see what happens, and like that is typically like the tip of the iceberg, and then you like kind of immerse into the world of infertility treatment from there. But
got it.
yeah, so we did a couple rounds of Clomid just with at-home timed intercourse. That didn't work. And then we decided to move forward with IUI, and we wanted it monitored because I wanted to know like what's happening in my body when I'm taking these drugs, and am
Hmm.
I actually responding the way I should be responding.
Yeah.
That actually gave us a lot of information.
Hmm.
So I started taking the Clomid, which you supposedly, and I'm not a doctor, so don't take my word on this, but typically you're not supposed to take more than like a certain amount of Clomid rounds like in your lifetime, and they
Hmm.
won't do them like back to back, or they won't let you exceed 3, 4, or 5, however many it is. But there is a expiration to that. Like you can't just keep doing Clomid for the rest of your life and hoping for the best. So we did like 3 rounds of timed intercourse and then didn't work, so we move on to IUI, and this time we're doing monitoring. So I would take the Clomid, and then you're going in like for me it was like every 2 days in the beginning, and they're monitoring, quote, it's follicle monitoring. So they have this really wonderful wand that we all call Wanda. And like when you see like ultrasounds in the movies, it's always like someone like lifting up their shirt and they're putting the cute gel on their cute little baby bump. No. So in the beginning, it is a transvaginal ultrasound. So the wand goes inside of you and they're looking for the quality of your eggs, the size of your follicles. So effectively, like every month, a healthy, fertile woman will produce a single follicle from one ovary or the other, and that follicle will rupture with a mature egg. That egg is either fertilized or it isn't fertilized. If it isn't, then it proceeds on its way and then causes your menstrual period. So, um, we learned on this first journey through IUI that I didn't respond to the drugs. These are like, I mean, Clomid, again, gateway drugs. So we're not talking like hardcore infertility drugs here. It's basically dipping your toe in to see what happens.
Okay.
And it didn't go well. So you're supposed to, for an IUI, they typically want you to have a handful of really nice, big, maturing follicles, a couple on each side, and then a few what they would call like a dominant or leading follicles. And they're like, all right, we're going to trigger you. And the trigger is an HCG shot, which basically tells your body, like, okay, ovulate. And then you ovulate within, 24 to 36 hours. And that's how they time when to do the IUI. So they're monitoring. I go in every other day for the transvaginal ultrasounds. Nothing's really happening. I'm really, really, really slow to develop these follicles. So slow that like at some point they were like, all right, maybe we just like call it a wash. But I'm like, hey, let's just like see what happens here. So eventually I mean, these time now knowing what I know now, it should be like 2 or 3 monitoring sessions and you're ready to go. We went like 2 weeks of waiting for these things to grow. And our dominant follicle never got above 15 millimeters, which isn't great. They told me that they like to trigger like 18, 20 millimeters plus, and they still triggered me, which I mean, we're already here. I've already bought the drugs. Like, we might as well give it a go. The doctor,
Mm-hmm.
well, I've seen babies on a 15 millimeter. So it's not like it isn't possible, but it's not great. So, like, I kind of knew going into the trigger shot that, like, there wasn't a great chance. So, we went ahead with it. Fine, let's do it. I do my trigger shot. We go in for the IUI, say our prayers. 7 days after you ovulate, there is this test called, like, typically it would be 21-day progesterone test to see if your body actually had this spike in progesterone after to confirm that you ovulated. And
Mm-hmm.
my progesterone was like negligible. So I
Mm-hmm.
didn't ovulate. So the egg or the follicle that was maturing never ruptured, never ovulated. So we didn't even have a shot that cycle, which sucks. But the nurse, I remember this like it was yesterday. She calls me and you never forget like the first time you have to inject yourself with something to try to make your baby. Like that is like a pretty, I don't know that it's traumatic. I mean, it's just like you're sitting in this bathroom, you're not in the bed, like snuggling, making love with your husband. Like you're in this sterile, sad. I mean, my husband was with me, but like you're injecting yourself with something to hope for this baby. You're crying, you're emotional. I was so nervous to give myself this shot that I made my husband film me doing it so that I could rewatch it 20 times to make sure I did it right. Like I was
Yeah.
very nervous about this. And the nurse calls me after the progesterone test. And it might have been like the way she said it that really pissed me off. But she's like, are you sure you did the trigger shot? And I'm thinking to myself, like, this just cost me like $5,000 out of pocket. The drugs
Uh-huh.
alone, I mean, the trigger shots alone are a couple $100. Like, you're asking me if I forgot to do it? Like, this is the most important day of my life so far. Like, of course I remembered. Well, I mean, like, are you sure it went in? I was like, I literally videoed it. Like, if you want, I will email you the video and you can watch it. Like, yes, I triggered. And she's like, well, your progesterone doesn't even show that you ovulated. I don't know what happened here. And, we'll get you on a consult with the doctor. And I was like, okay, that's great. So I get on the consult with the doctor. I get on the calendar for it. And in the meantime, all of these clinics, they have like an online portal. And in the meantime, I get paperwork sent in the portal for IVF. And I'm thinking, like, haven't even had my consult with the doctor to explain to me why the first IUI went wrong. And I didn't respond to the drugs. I didn't create follicles. Like, why would I jump into IVF next with having like no understanding of what went wrong, no
Yeah.
understanding of why my body didn't follow the directions here? Like,
Hmm.
to me, it was like, and again, I'm super sensitive, super hormonal, like you're in the thick of it. And I was devastated. I'm like, so this is it. Like, we're just done with this. We're moving on to IVF. Like, I'm just a lost cause now. So I gave that doctor like one more for any doctors out there right now, I swear I'm not a horrible patient because I'm painting myself to sound like a doctor hopper, which like in the fertility world, I feel is fairly common. But I just like wasn't feeling heard, wasn't feeling listened to. And again, I wanted to know what was going wrong with my body. I didn't just want to hear how am I going to get my baby. So
Yeah.
I asked the question of like, why didn't these develop? And look, I get that doctors don't have answers to everything, but it wasn't even like, hey, we're going to change this medication, or maybe we need to do this test, or it was just like, well, luck of the draw. And I was not willing to accept that.
Yeah.
Um,
And I feel like, not to interrupt your
no,
flow
no,
here,
please
but
do.
what is concerning to me is it's just like, well, we're just going to keep pushing Ashley through a pipeline
Yes,
versus we're like realizing that the progesterone isn't spiking. Can that can from my again layman understanding that is often tied to miscarrying. Like so if
yes,
you were able to get pregnant,
yes,
we want this isn't just like I want to get pregnant, I want to have a baby.
yes.
And
Oh,
so
thank you
so
for
like
knowing that and like doing your hormone research. Yeah, it is. You're correct. It is.
so it's just concerning to me that they just like keep pushing you through. Also, I feel like you just have to acknowledge that to ask if you actually did the shot.
I
Like there's
remember
just
her
so many.
name. I remember where I was sitting. Like I was so dumbfounded. I literally told my husband the story and he was like, "Okay, don't take it personally. She's a nurse." And I'm like, "You're a good person because
Yeah,
again, he's like my cheerleader on the sidelines trying to keep me positive and excited and engaged and I'm like in the trenches drowning and I'm like, "Listen, she could have said it in 100 different ways like, "Hey, tell me about the trigger shot experience. Like,
exactly.
did you feel comfortable giving it to yourself? Did anything go wrong in the process? Like, I noticed your progesterone didn't spike. Let's talk about why that may have happened and how we can fix that for next time."
Hmm.
And that was
Hmm.
not how it was approached. So,
I also just feel like I have to highlight, and I'll speak from personal experience, but I know this is an experience of people walking around in female bodies, specifically the United States, is that there is a history of medical professionals not believing women and not listening to women and dismissing women. My experience
no.
with that recently, not even nearly as high stakes as what you're talking about, Ashley, but like I went into the doctor being like, I think I might be anemic. I'm having all these symptoms. Am I going through menopause early? No, well, tell me about your menstruation. I do. I just don't think that that's enough. I pulled an eight. My ferritin was an eight. Yeah, girl. And I was just, again, not. Maybe I'll do a whole other story about this, about like people with low iron because of how prevalent that is in women in the US. But I was like, oh my God, this OB is dismissing me, being like, I did my research, I'm having these symptoms.
Liz.
And I was just like so dismissed. And so when I hear your story, I'm like, I bet other female listeners or partners of female listeners will be like, or partners of women. You know what I'm trying to say,
Yeah,
people.
yeah, no, I know exactly. You know what?
Like you probably have witnessed a woman not being listened to in a
100%.
medical setting. And so I guess I'm bringing up my story to be like, that's
Oh,
resonating
it's
with me.
relevant. And also, just to tie this back to how relevant it is, I had gestational anemia, and that's like very, very common. And
Mm-hmm.
anemia in women, I mean, like, I feel like anemia in anybody, but specifically in women because I don't know, bleed for 7 days
Right.
out of every
Right.
month. It's
Exactly.
common. And
Yep.
I don't think it's like people, the symptoms, oh, I'm lightheaded. I'm getting really nauseous. I don't feel right. Oh, okay. Well, you're hysterical and you're on your period. And
Yeah.
I think that they brush it under as like PMS.
Oh,
And
totally.
all the while, we're like literally being drained of our iron sources, walking around with hemoglobins of 9. I hope that
Well,
you found a doctor that actually like listens to you.
um, let's just say the insurance that I had at the time, speaking of like insurance strife,
Oh,
I needed to have a seven to get an infusion.
you're kidding me.
I'm not
Oral?
kidding. If I found out actually a couple months ago, from a nurse at a baby shower that I started talking to, where if I would have walked into an emergency room and I would have presented with that low of an iron count, I would have had an emergency transfusion. So my insurance wouldn't cover it. And I have spent most of this last year trying to recover by nutrition. And yeah, I wasn't able to, yeah, I wasn't able to
You like,
find
were
a
you like
provider
taking
who
ferric iron tablets?
I'm taking iron. I take capsules of ground up beef organs. I take
I
six of
hope
those
if you're
capsules every
taking
day.
iron, you also are keeping like a really great stool softener in there. TMI.
Uh,
Iron is not a good recipe for your belly.
I'll just the last thing I'll say about, I guess, inserting my little iron story
No,
here
it's
is
important.
part of it really agitated, perplexed me was, do I we both are appreciators of science, data, research. And so I started doing some research about what are the consequences if I have anemia long term. Also, having disclosed to every medical professional that I talk to at this point in my life, hey, both sides of the family, I have women who have had cardiovascular events. My grandma
Yep.
had a stroke. My aunt had a sudden, like, her heart valve was dysfunctioning and she died suddenly at 62. I'm like, I need to keep a track of my heart. I need to be heart healthy. I need to be heart aware. And what do we know about low ferritin is, like, if women live with that long term, it can contribute to all of these things. And so I was just like, help to your point about, like, I need to figure out what's going on here before moving on to the next
Yeah.
stage.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to do with my, again, what feels like lower risk. But I'm like,
No, not lower risk.
doctors, are you gonna just let me live my life knowing that you need a, and also for listeners who don't know, my doctor told me people feel good at 50 or higher. And to give blood, I think you need to have 100, if I'm not mistaken. So I was an 8. And as of June, I'm now a 38, but, like, I'm still not at a 50. And so I'm just like, and I'm
Also,
doing it with my
know
nutrition.
that if your ferritin was at an 8, there's also a very high likelihood that your hemoglobin was very low. Um,
Mm.
and like your hemoglobin is responsible for oxygen transport in your body. Oh,
Okay, yes, and that's the
pretty
other thing.
important.
I had so part of where I realized something was wrong and where I started thinking that maybe I was going into early menopause was I had a great fulfilling exercise routine,
Yeah.
and it involved getting my heart rate up, like, multiple times a week, probably
Yep.
like 5 days a week, most weeks. And what started changing was I would get on my bike and I would be like, I am going to die this exact same workout, having changed nothing else
Yep.
other than my sleep was getting impacted. So I was
That's low
having, like,
hemoglobin. Yeah, you have no oxygen in your
I was like, and now I know where I was having all this
oh
negative
man.
self-talk about, like, oh my gosh, I must have just
It's
really
toxic.
slacked, and why can't I can't sleep, so I can't rest. So
Oh,
anyway,
I'm
there's
so
all
sorry.
this. So yeah, so I've been just I guess I just wanted to share that and to
No, I
say
think
I
that's
know
important.
that we're not the only women that have been
I mean,
dismissed.
clearly you had to advocate for yourself to get someone to listen to you. This is not uniquely tied to infertility. I mean, I think that in general, women are absolutely dismissed, like for
Yes.
hysteria, for PMS, because we're anxious for some reason. I mean,
Yep.
there's a long, 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 long history of
Yes.
it.
And I think it's an important thing for us to discuss. And I want to get back to your story, not only about, like, self advocacy, but so far, we've had two amazing guests of the podcast who have had to do a lot of medical advocacy for their children. That is, like, so navigating the medical system, whether you're advocating for yourself, your child, where I hope to have people come on and talk about advocating for aging people who might not
Yeah,
be able to advocate for themselves because of cognition or other reasons. This is a thing. And I want people to know that, like, how we might approach it, like you did. Like, you're saying I'm probably an annoying patient. I'm like, girl's prepared. She's, you're not settling, you're not letting the process move forward until you're ready. And I think that that's just so people just need to hear that, and to also know, like, you're not alone. You're not alone in having to be an advocate for yourself, for your child, for your
bad,
mother.
but it's true. Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
anyway, I'll get
No
off
one's
my
gonna say
soapbox
no.
there. Gets
It's
me heated.
true. True. I mean, I kind of learned that like no one's coming to save me, right? Like if I want to
Yeah.
figure this out, like I'm gonna have to do the legwork here. Once you've kind of committed to that, the ball gets
Hmm.
rolling and you're like into it. Like I got
Yeah.
really into it. Every spare moment, obviously I was working full time but like any spare moment that I had was always spent trying to dig deeper into this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I remember, so this was now, we left third, undisclosed fertility clinic. I would say that, God, I have a journal. I wrote to my unborn baby every day for like the
Oh,
last 6 years. So I have like timestamps
oh.
on everything that ever happened. I want to say it was maybe like 2021 because I remember my husband not being able to, how do I put this, contribute his piece
Mm-hmm.
in the office. They made him
Oh,
at home. So it was definitely during COVID,
okay.
maybe like 2021 ish.
Okay. Okay.
So at that time, I was like, all right, I liked this doctor, but I wasn't in love with their approach. I hated that they sent me my IVF paperwork. And I brought it up to them and I'm like, hey, are you trying to tell me that like this is we're done exploring and you're just moving, you're funneling me into the next
Yeah.
stage of this? And they were like, oh, we're so sorry. And I was like, no, 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 it's okay. I don't think I belong here. So
Mm,
this is now, okay, so we started in like 2018. So now it's been like 4 years. And now I'm like 32 and I'm thinking like, all right, as excited as I am to figure out what's wrong with my body, like we really need to get rolling with some steam here. And at this point I went a little bit manic. And we had started snowbirding and I bought a horse. And I was like, you know what? I need to do something for myself. I
yeah.
actually didn't buy him. I adopted him, but I got a horse. I grew up riding, and when I had when my husband and I got married and moved, it just was not a piece of the lifestyle that I could, afford or make happen with my new career, and et cetera, et cetera. So
Mm-hmm.
now I'm in this place. I'm home at my family farm, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do something good for myself. Everyone's telling me I should take a vacation or, lower my cortisol. That's everyone's aunt loves to tell
Oh,
me, take a deep breath. No one can get pregnant with their high cortisol. So I'm like, you know what? Maybe there's some truth to this. So I
yeah.
I get this horse and I tell myself I am going to have a summer of Ashlee. Like while I'm going through new diagnostics and trying to find a new doctor, I am going to do something for myself and invest. I mean, you lose yourself in infertility. Like you find yourself questioning like, what is my purpose on this planet if I can't be a parent? Like it gets really dark sometimes. So I was like, you know what?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not going to be a parent today, I'm going to do something that's going to make me feel valuable, that's going to make me feel happy. So I adopt this horse and I commit to Summer of Ashlee, and my amazing husband, helps me fund it and came to all my horse shows. And we had a really wonderful season that kind of dragged into 2 seasons. But all the while, I am now have this new outlet and I'm like, all right, I'm feeling mentally more clear. I'm riding every day. I have a new goal that doesn't include just obsessively sitting on PubMed trying to pull, every piece of
Yeah.
that's ever been written on female
You're
infertility. So I think around that time is when I started to get like a little bit more clear-headed, less emotional, and then like now I'm on a mission. I have this like I remember it like it was yesterday. It was like a blue manila folder. And in it was like every peer-reviewed journal article that I had ever pulled with all this data. And I had ended up creating like a flow chart, like an if-then flow chart. So like it was a big flow chart. So like, all right, test, we're testing our baseline estrogen and it turns this, if this, then that. And basically just funneled down to like, what could the possible diagnoses be? And, we're still working with hypothalamic amenorrhea, but my hormone levels were not indicative of that. They had just assumed that because I had been a bodybuilder and had been underweight for quite some time, but there was no evidence medically that was the case. And a lot of them would say like, oh, it's subclinical, like you're sliding under the radar because your levels are like, high enough that we're not noticing it, but low enough that your body is feeling the repercussions of it. So
mm.
I make this flow chart, which I'm sure was like the most obnoxious thing in the world to the doctor. I go to my all-time most loved doctor in the whole world, and I will name him because he's the best guy in the whole world, is Dr. Angelo Alexander. He'd been my OBGYN since I was like a kid, since I went to like my first gynecologist visit, like, delivered my sister's babies, like just a good guy. And I had been seeing him for like 15 years. I went to him and I'm like, look, I don't need anything today. I don't need a pap smear. I just need help. Like, I don't know where to go. I've seen 3 different clinics. And he's also a friend of my dad's. Their practices used to be right next to each other at the hospital. And I'm like, I
Oh,
just need some help. Like, I need you to
yeah.
guide me. Like, where do I go from here? And he's like, just this sweet, like, it reminds you of like the Italian grandpa, just like hug, give you like a big hug. And
Yeah.
he's like, listen, kid, you want to go see Chuck Miller. And I'm going to name this doctor too because I think he's a absolute medical genius. And this was the last clinic that we ever went to. So
Okay.
yeah, the story's getting good. So Dr. Charles Miller is who he referred us to. And he's like, Chuck is the best guy in the business. You got to go to Chuck. And I'm like, okay. So now we're in summer of Ashlee. I call the office of Dr. Charles Miller and they're like, I think at this point it was probably like July of 21, 22. My timeline's real good here. The summer a few years ago. So I call in and I know it's summer because they're like, well, we can get you in for a consultation in like December. And I'm like, oh shit. Like, I guess this guy really is the best in the business. If it's going to
Yeah.
take me like 5 months to get in. And I said, okay, no problem. And they're like, in the meantime, here's a list of like supplements that we want you to start taking and just keep doing your thing. And hopefully we don't see you in December, but hopefully you'll be pregnant by then. Okay, great. So December comes and we were back in Florida now. So we're sitting at our dining room table and we get on the phone with him. And I had taken my blue manila folder of everything that I had ever researched in my whole life and all of my test results from the last 4 years and my flow chart of potential diagnoses. And I had uploaded all of this into my patient portal, like in the beginning, before, like, back in the summertime while I was waiting for this guy to have an opening. And he gets on the line and he's like, you've clearly done your research and I can so appreciate it. And he's like, I think we're going to be able to do this. And and he just starts spatting off like, all have you done this? Have you done this? And I'm like, no, like no one has ever mentioned this. And he was the first one to be like, I'm not doing a damn thing until we have your husband fully examined. Like, I mean, head to toe.
Thank you.
What's crazy though is like he knew that like I wasn't menstruating. And I think that pneumonia was being written off because they all were assuming that because I was amenorrheic that it was just my problem. But I had had a few periods in my life. Clearly I had one on my honeymoon. So and I had had some sporadically throughout, I mean, maybe one or two a year. So impossible to time. But I still spent, hundreds of dollars on LH tests so that I'd pee on a strip every day, just praying that it would be right. So Dr. Miller said, and it wasn't just like a sperm analysis. He asked for DNA fragmentation, a CAP score, which is like a very specific, you have to like send away like a frozen specimen, obviously then like a normal semen analysis, do all the things. And he's like, I won't even consider anything until we have all of this information in the books. Then he ordered like the same gamut of tests for me. They were not like physiological tests. Like all of the anatomy had already, Asherman syndrome, which is like adhesions inside of your uterus, had been ruled out. Fallopian stenosis, which is like when your fallopian tubes get too narrow that the eggs can't come out, that had been ruled out. So the shape of my uterus was normal. We knew that physiologically, anatomically, I was fine. So he starts ordering this battery of tests where I'd have to go back and look because they were so out of left field. I would have never in my life, I would never have been able to advocate myself for these tests because I didn't know they existed. So now don't have to wait 5 months between appointments because I'm like an active patient. We get all these tests back and we have another consultation with him to decide what to do moving forward. And he's like, I still don't know what the answer is here because everything looks pretty good. But your baseline ultrasound, had you checked all of the boxes for PCOS, I would say that was probably the answer. But all of your hormone levels are normal. I'm not having any, what is like hirsuistic, like I'm not like growing facial hair. I don't have any of the symptoms that would go with hirsuism. I don't check any boxes except for my baseline ultrasound showed what he thought could be polycystic ovaries. And he's like, so that could be what we're dealing with. So how would you feel about trying a cycle with metformin? And metformin is a drug that is typically used for diabetics. And they have seen, and of course I had to do all my research on metformin, but they have seen in non-diabetic women that have PCOS, they have seen a huge increase in fertility. So I'm like, well, I guess it can't hurt. So like, let's give it a go. So I take the metformin. It made my stomach terribly upset, but I'm like, a small price to pay. And we didn't have success with that. But he tried and like he kept trying and he kept digging. And he was looking for answers for me. And I appreciated that so much. Dr. Miller was the first doctor that actually made me feel like it was just he and I in this universe. And like I was his only patient, and he was absolutely incredible. His staff was wonderful. I always felt so. I mean, when you go for those ultrasounds too, these ultrasound techs are they deliver a lot of bad news every day. They deliver a lot of good news every day. I mean, they're just the most kind, compassionate people. Loved them. So we get a lot of answers from Dr. Miller. And I knew I loved him when he was like, I don't think that you need to jump into IVF right away. Like, I'm not seeing anything here that's indicative that you cannot get pregnant on your own. And, my husband and I are like devout Protestant Christians, and we had struggled. I'm a huge IVF advocate, but like personally, I had struggled with a lot of that concept just because of my faith. I just like didn't feel I wasn't 100% that I'm like, if we can get pregnant on our own, if IUI is an option, why I moved to IVF unnecessarily. And that was kind of he said that too. And he knew he was going to make more money on me if we did IVF than if we did IUI. And he still was like, let's give this a good old fashioned college try. Like you have protocols before that I can study. They clearly didn't work. Let's modify those and see if we can find a program or a regimen that works for you. So he changed everything. We did another IUI, and this time we had some injectable drugs because he knew I wasn't responding to the Clomid. I actually think we tried one more round of Clomid and timed intercourse because he wanted to like double the Clomid and see if that did anything. And I don't think it worked, and that's why we moved to injectables. And then finally, we use these injectables, and I am responding. And I'm like, this is great. So this was our last IUI, and well, retrospectively, at the time we didn't know it would be our last one. But so we're going in for our follicle monitoring, and this clinic is like an hour and 15 minutes away. And we're driving there every morning, listening to our Right Now Media, like religious podcasts. We're listening to Francis Chan, the Book of Job. I'll never forget it. The Book of Job is like a very, very dark book of the Bible about
Yeah.
waiting in God's promise.
Yeah. Job goes through it.
Yes, Job goes through it. And so we're sitting there listening to Francis Chan lecture on the Book of Job, and I'm like, if Job can get through this, we can too. Like, we're gonna be okay. So we make our commute and we're talking like 4:30 a.m. ish because our monitoring appointments would be before work. So we're driving to Naperville every day or every other day. And the follicles are growing, and we're so excited. And we finally get a lead follicle that's like 18 millimeters. We're like, this is the one, and everything looks great, and my estrogen is high. This doctor finally paid attention to my low progesterone, puts me on progesterone suppositories. I mean, like everything was coming together, and I felt so positive. We finally go in the day before Halloween, and we have our IUI. And on our way home, we stopped at this little like kids, like not a toy store, but like a cute little like toys, clothes, whatever menagerie.
Yeah.
We got what we called like our little faith purchase. It was like this little gray bunny, and we hang on to that bunny. And we got home, and I put it into my drawer of all the other things that I have always bought but can't bring out. And in that drawer was also a onesie that I bought when my now almost 4-year-old nephew, when my sister-in-law was pregnant with him, and it said, I may be small, but I'm going to be a cousin. And I thought, I mean, he's 4. I bought that
Yeah.
when my sister-in-law was pregnant with him. And I
Yeah.
was so sure it was going to work that I just like kept this onesie in that drawer because I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I'll be able to give it to her. And like, here we are.
Mm.
But anyways, so my drawer of faith purchases that I had just been stockpiling, and I put the bunny in there, and I was so sure that this was it. And we get our 7-day progesterone test. The progesterone looks great. The problem that I couldn't get through though, and I'm trying to like remember what the exact issue was that I wasn't following. Actually, this happened after. Hold on. I'm getting ahead of myself. So we get the progesterone test back. It looks great. It's actually like very, very high. And I get my beta back. Your beta blood test is the HCG test that they do to determine if you're pregnant. You have your dreaded 2-week wait, the 14-day window that you're waiting, and I get it back, and I'm not pregnant. So they call me, and I'm sure it's the worst phone call they have to make, a million of them a day, and they
Yeah.
say, we're so sorry, your beta came back, and it was 0. And I was like, okay, thank you for telling me. And now I'm like Katie bar the door. Like I'm like hell on a mission, like hell on wheels, like we're gonna figure this shit out. So then I start going down this deep rabbit hole of like, okay, did I ovulate? Because they have me on progesterone. So I'm taking progesterone. Is that masking that my body is not actually producing its own progesterone? Like, how do you know that?
Oh,
Right. So like
yeah.
in my brain, I'm thinking, you can't tell the difference between endogenous and exogenous progesterone. You don't know if what you're testing is the suppositories that I'm putting in my body every day, or if that's innately what my body is creating, after it ovulated. So I was not convinced that I ovulated, and I probably, looking back on it, was a little bit like a manic state. So I was clinging on to that, and I was like, "Well, I didn't ovulate, and that's why it didn't work." And so my husband and I sit down that night, and he was like, we need to talk about what's going to happen next. And I was like, listen, I don't feel, and like, I'll get a little religious here. So for listeners that do not subscribe, totally fine. But, I was like, I just don't feel like called right now to do that. Like, I'm not feeling it in my bones that IVF is right for us right now. I have not come to peace with the fact that this is not happening the way that I wanted it to happen. And I'm like kind of mourning this right now. So like, I'm really not ready to have this conversation. And that was probably, and I know you had mentioned before the podcast, just briefing on if I feel comfortable talking about what it's done to our marriage. That was
Yeah.
probably like the first time we fought about this, because I was like pretty dead set on like, I don't think I ever want to do IVF. Like, I don't know that that's ever something I'm going to feel comfortable with. And I think that made my husband feel really alienated, because he was,
Mm.
I'll do anything and I want you to be with me in doing anything. And that caused a little bit of stress. But like in that
Yeah.
moment, we started having the sad conversations of like, again, if you is all I ever get, then that's enough. And he kept
Yeah.
repeating that, like, that's okay. Don't worry. Like, if you are all I ever get, that is enough. But I know you want this as badly as I do. And he kept telling me, like, I think you're self-sabotaging, you're afraid, and I get it. But, there's more that we can do. And I'm sure there was more that we could do, but I just like was not ready to do it. So I'm like, I want to do one more IUI. I want to have a consult with Dr. Miller. I want to talk through this progesterone thing. I want him to tell me what he thinks about my Dr. Google understanding of my progesterone. And he was like, look, you definitely ovulated. Your progesterone was so high that even if the suppositories were not there, like, it's indicative. Like, you definitely did. We'll bring you in for an ultrasound just to see what happened to those follicles. And I was like, okay. So I go back in for another baseline, and it turns out that I actually like hyper responded to some of the drugs, and I developed functional cysts. So some of the
Mm.
follicles that don't rupture, that get really mature and big, they can turn into functional cysts. And I had one in both ovaries. And the one on the right was 58 millimeters, which, like, a quick Google search told me was like close to the size of a skateboard wheel.
Oh my
So
goodness.
big, big, very large, and
Yeah.
functional, meaning that they're not related to PCOS. They are a result of the cycle that we just did, and they emit hormones. So this is last fall, sometime in November. I remember getting the call. I remember getting the call that the beta was 0 the week before Thanksgiving. So this had to have
Mm.
been like late November, early December.
Yeah.
So I go in, they say, you have these two cysts. Here are your options. We're canceling your next cycle. We're not going to move forward, because they basically told me that the cyst emits hormones that will combat whatever drugs you're taking, and it just won't be a successful cycle. So your options are to take birth control, and that can help to, these cysts to subside faster, or you can just kind of let them do their thing and see what happens. And to me, it felt like sacrilegious to take birth control after having trying to get pregnant for 5 years. And I was like,
Yeah.
I don't feel super comfortable taking birth control. So like, I guess let's just see what happens. And they're like, great, we'll bring you back after Christmas, and we'll see if there's any movement in your in those follicles, or in the cysts, and if they're subsided, we can move forward. Okay, great. So at this point, I'm like beside myself. Like I don't know why. I mean, obviously I know why. Like you're in the trenches and it feels like everything's working against you and nothing. And I know some people have it so much worse than me. And I don't let that, like I certainly don't let that fall on deaf ears. Like I know that my
Mm-hmm.
story is not the worst one out there by a long stretch, but
Mm.
when you're in the trenches, it just feels like the whole world is falling down on you. It's just the absolute worst
Yeah.
thing in the world. And I'm like, all right, so nothing is going my way. It just feels more and more out of reach every single time. We went to a comedy show on the Friday after Thanksgiving, and I had too much to drink. And on the way home, I'm like, I need Dairy Queen and I need a
Yeah.
Christmas tree. So my husband takes me to Dairy Queen. We buy a Christmas tree. And that Sunday, I go to church because I'm like, I got to fill up my God tank thing, like let's just try to be grateful and move forward. Everything's going to be fine. And I walk in, like I can't even make this shit up. I'm like recounting all of this and I'm like, oh my God, like this is like a Lifetime movie. I walk in to Sunday Mass and it is baptism Sunday. And I'm like,
Oh,
no, I can't be here. So I'm
yeah.
with my dad. I don't know where my husband was. My husband was not with us, and he also was not in town because I couldn't call him because I called my best friend to come get me. So clearly my husband was not available. I'd gone to church with my dad and I ran out and it's cold outside. I go and I sit outside. I call my best friend who's on my horse at the time. She gets off my horse, comes in, gets in the car, drives to the church with her helmet on and comes and picks me up. And I was like, I don't want to talk. I just need you to take me home. And I'm like,
Yeah.
and my dad gets home and he's like, what happened? And I was like, I just could not, I couldn't sit there and watch all these babies be baptized. Like I had a visceral reaction. I just couldn't do it. And I'm just feeling at this point, like, again, you're sitting there wondering like, what is my purpose on this planet? Like if you are called to be a parent and you feel with every fiber of your being that your purpose in life is to bring new life here and to raise up unique human beings and launch them into the world to go do wonderful things, and that's stolen from you, it's like you don't recognize yourself anymore. Like you lose
Yeah.
yourself, you lose your own understanding of who you are and what you're here for. And I was just in a super dark place. And
Yeah.
I I had been oscillating on whether or not I was going to go on this work trip. I'm like remembering things as I'm telling this to you. So at that time, we had this trip. I was going to not go because I thought we'd have another IUI. So I find out that I have this cyst, and then they're like, we're canceling your cycle. And I was like, okay, great. Well, then I'm going to go on this work trip. So I call my boss and I'm like, hey, turns out I can go. Will you please, like, allow me an extra whatever budget so that I can buy this plane ticket and head out to California? And she's like, totally. So I buy my ticket to AAEP and I'm like, I'm going to go. This is going to be good. I'm in a leadership role at work. This is like, I'm just going to dive back into my job and that's going to help me. We're just going to repress these feelings. I'm going to distract myself with another shiny thing. It's going to be
And what's
so.
AAEP?
I'm sorry, is the American, oh my God, I should know this. Uh, American Association of Equine Practitioners, maybe?
Okay,
So for
that's what
my
I
job.
thought. The only reason I know that is because when I saw you had a master's in equine science, I went in like a little rabbit hole of like,
Yeah, it's either the
what kind of
American
jobs do these people have?
or like American Academy, but it's
Okay.
basically like a huge convention for veterinarians.
Okay. Okay.
So my company had a booth there, and I was like, yeah, I'm the head of R&D for my company, and I was like, I should go and see what's up and walk the floor, come up with some new
Yeah.
ideas. So I did. I went to California and I saw all my coworkers, and it was really wonderful. And I came home a little bit refreshed, and it was December 2nd. Now I remember everything vividly because this is my Hail Mary story. It was December 2nd, and I came home a day early from AAEP. I came home on Saturday. The show ended on Sunday because I'm the president of a nonprofit in my area, and the Christmas party was that night, and I had to go. So I came home early and Saturday afternoon, and I got home, and I don't know why. I was just like reinvigorated by life. And this is also like another TMI part of infertility. But infertility also steals your intimacy, your sex drive. Like, you
I'd
don't,
imagine.
yeah, it's like everything is so calculated. It's like, oh, well, I'm ovulating. Let's go have really unpassionate sex for 4 seconds so that we can get this. Oh, I mean, it steals all of the fun out of it.
Sure.
But in this moment, I'm like, all right, I just got back from this nice work trip. We're in San Diego. I'm feeling good. Um, like, let's just have spontaneous sex. And we did, and I went on with my day. And then went to the Christmas party and moved on with my life. Now, mind you, all the while, I've been told that I have these two functional cysts on my ovaries that are emitting estrogen to the level, I think it was estrogen, to the level that like would make it so that I couldn't get pregnant. Great.
Hmm.
That's why they offered me the birth control pills, which I declined.
Got it.
So that's December 2nd. And then my mom had a 70th birthday party. We threw this big party for her. December goes by. I was not psychotic during this 2 week wait because I did have no idea that I was actually like ovulating on the second. So it was just like super crazy. So my husband and I go to one of my childhood best friends. Her son was turning 2. We actually went to his third birthday party today. So this all happened
Oh,
exactly a year ago.
oh my gosh. I love that so much.
I know.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
We went to his second birthday party, and my husband was holding him, and he was late, like late to speak, and didn't have like a full vocabulary yet. And my husband is holding him, and like he's like a very like affectionate kid, and he like goes to put him down, and like we're not over, I mean, I'm very close with my friend, but her children, they don't know me, but I lived in Florida, so we don't have the tightest relationship. He would not let go of pneumonia. I have
Oh my gosh.
I have a picture of this, and it's a live photo, which I'm so happy about because you can like see his eyes welling up. He's holding, I'm not going to name him, but he's holding my best friend's son, and he's like nuzzling, her son is like nuzzling down into his neck, and pneumonia turns his head, and he's got like big tears in his eyes. I'm starting to cry, and I take a picture of it, and I was like, are you kidding me? Like we have to keep fighting for this. Like you want
Yeah.
to be a dad. So I'm like starting to feel positive. I'm feeling like we're on the upswing of this. So now his birthday, I mean, if his party was today, we're like it was, I know the day, I have it written right here, 12/13/23. That was the day I found out. So we just passed it. So we're approaching that day, and I don't know why I took the pregnancy test. I really don't know why. I think as infertile people who are amenorrheic and you don't ovulate and you don't have a period, you find yourself taking a lot of pregnancy tests just to have a beer because you're like, I don't know if I'm pregnant. I haven't had a period in 6 months. Did I ovulate? I don't know. So
Yeah.
probably was that we were planning to go out for dinner or something, and I wanted to have a glass of wine. I don't remember why I took it, but I had like a box of the Amazon cheapies and like the tiny little strips that are like $1.
Oh yeah.
You just keep them. You don't use the expensive ones when you're infertile because you go through them like water.
Yeah,
So you get the
exactly.
box of 100 for like $10. And I pee on it and forget it and move on with my day because I'm just so used to doing that. And I walk back into the room and I'm like, holy fuck! Like I've had false positives before, so I'm like, I'm not gonna get excited. Um,
Yeah.
but like, what the fuck? So I grab it and I'm sitting in next to the room where my husband was sitting, run down this long hallway, and I open the door and I'm like shaking and I'm like, tell me that you see this. Like, tell me that you see this line. And my sweet, sweet, amazing husband, who's so kind and trying to protect me, was like, hey, remember they told you you have these cysts. There's a lot of hormones going through your body. Take a deep breath. We're going to go get more pregnancy tests. I just don't want you to get your hopes up about this. Like
Mm.
this has happened before. Just like, don't overdo it in your brain. But of course, like you can't not. Like I'm already thinking about the next 30 years flashes through your head. And you're like, oh my God, like it's finally happening. You're thinking of
Hmm.
their names. Like it literally every thought in the world is going through your head. And I'm like, I know you're online right now, and so am I, and we're both working because it's a weekday, but like close your computer, we're going to Walgreens. And
Yeah.
we get to Walgreens and I buy like 7. I had to get every kind. I had to get the digital ones, I had to get the regular ones. The blue dye tests are notoriously bad, so I needed some pink ones too. We have to get all of them. And I come home and I pee on 7 sticks. And all 7 of them are positive. And I'm like, there's no way. Like, so I call my pastor's wife and I'm like, Susie, you're not going to believe this. And she's like, I've been praying for you. And I'm like, okay, but don't get excited. Nemanja thinks that maybe, and she was like, yeah, I was looking at that up too. So we're all going to keep praying and no one's going to get excited. Okay, great. We go to in the infertility world, you'll typically be seen like immediately instead of you call your OB and they're like, great, we'll do an ultrasound at 12 weeks. So they brought me in right away. They did a beta blood test of your HCG. And then every 3 days, they want to see it double. It doubled every 3 days. Um, we went in for our first ultrasounds. It was a little early. There was no heartbeat. So like at that time, we're still, very terrified. We don't know what's happening. I'm not even sure that I'm really pregnant. And we go in at 6 weeks. Again, we're still listening to the Book of Job on our route, on our ride there every day, just praying that this is real. And we go in for, I think it was like 6 weeks and 3 days. And our first one was like 5 weeks and 3 days, but we saw her. She was there. And then at 6 weeks and 3 days, she had a heartbeat. And we're like, holy shit, like this is real. I mean, every single day that, I mean, I don't even really know how to explain it other than like you are waiting for the other shoe to drop. Everything that goes wrong or everything that feels, oh my God, I was on the golf cart and I hit a really big bump. Like, do you think that that's good? And he's like, babe, you're 6 weeks pregnant. The bump is like, you're totally fine. But like everything that happens, you're
Yeah.
overanalyzing it and you're just waiting for the other shoe to drop for 40 weeks. I had a very easy pregnancy. I say easy. I was anemic, but I had a great pregnancy. I was like, God blessed me with this wonderful pregnancy. We had no complications. I was very lucky. And she decided that she wanted to come a week and a day early.
Okay.
And my water broke and I was at a concert. My water broke and I went into labor. And then that's the whole next story of my birth didn't go great, that I mean, so that whole chunk from like the end of October when we started our IUI and December 13th when we found out that we were pregnant naturally, which like I actually can't understand because I don't think enough time had even passed for me to like end a cycle and then have a cycle. So, and the listeners can't see my face right now, but it's a face of skepticism. I'm still not sure that I ovulated. I think my progesterone, because I don't think a full cycle had even happened for me to have been able to start over. I'd never had my period. So, like, to have a period, to go through the first piece of your menstrual cycle, to ovulate, I can't calculate that all of that happened. So, I'm still not convinced about the IUI. But either way, somehow, some way, by the stroke of God in heaven, we found out we were pregnant and it was real.
Wow.
Every time we'd go in there, they'd see us every week for the first 12 weeks. And every time we'd go in there, we'd see her on the screen. Well, we didn't know it was her. We would just, we in this little silly voice would be, hang on, little one, like, hang on tight,
Yeah.
please, hang in there. And every week she'd get a little bit bigger. I mean, obviously, we have a very happy ending, which I know you
Mhm.
and I chatted about that a lot of people in the infertility world don't love to hear about like natural conception. And you know what? I didn't either. Like when I was
Sure.
hearing about like a friend that like, oh well, it just happened for us. Like that is not. But I think that hearing that it happened to someone who had been waiting for a long time, like there's hope in that story. So I hope that
Yeah.
that's, what someone could take away from it, that like, we were both kind of ready to throw in the towel and we ended up not moving forward with IVF. I think that there's a huge portion of the culture, the infertility culture, that like if I say I didn't do IVF, then oh well, you didn't really want it that bad. Like you didn't
Oh.
do, you know what I mean? Like you did
Yeah.
everything that there was. And if I had
Mhm.
said I don't want to do IVF, oh well then like you're throwing in the towel. And it's not everybody, but there is, I was part of some groups on, some support groups on the internet. And if you would breathe a word of like, well, I'd like to take a step back, like there were always the supportive women who were like, yes, do what you have to do, but there was a lot of voices in the peanut gallery that made you feel like you were giving up or that
Mm.
you're not actually dedicated to this if you're not willing to take the next step. And I think that that's really, I mean, there's women, I follow a gal on Instagram who just adopted a little boy, and she and her husband like made the decision like, we are not doing IVF, this is not something that's right for us, and if we never have kids then so be it, that's just not part of
Mhm.
and I totally respect that. So, but it was tough because for us I actually didn't tell a lot of people that we got pregnant
Really?
because I was not ashamed is not the right word, but like, number one, after you've gone through it for 5 years and you tell someone that you got pregnant naturally, the first thing they say is, see, I told you. All you had to do was take a deep breath and go to Mexico for the weekend. I knew you could get pregnant all along. This was all in your head. And so like,
Mm.
that's super invalidating. And not that I want to wear my struggle as a badge of honor, but like that was a shitty 5 years. Like, I feel like I
Right.
lost time of my life. And to just say, like, oh, well, you just had to hang in there a little bit longer. Like, well, thanks, Barbara. Like, I
Hmm.
appreciate your concern, but like, so there was, I think, a little bit of taboo associated with that. So I like kept that to myself, except for like, my very close few. And I actually never announced my pregnancy on the internet. I never put it on Facebook. I never put it on Instagram. I was so afraid that I was going to lose
Hmm.
pregnancy, that something was going to happen. And I
Hmm.
told all my friends and family, but I just was not, so I never announced it until she was born. I kept it to myself, and I didn't want unsolicited advice. I didn't want the
Right.
fertility warriors to come for me. And I felt weird, like in this weird limbo of, I don't fit anywhere anymore. I don't have a baby yet, so I can't be in the mom groups. And I got pregnant, so I'm not welcome in the infertility world anymore. And it was a strange transition. And I can't complain, right? Because I was pregnant, but it was a very lonely place for a little while. That's for sure.
Yeah. That does sound lonely. And I feel like what it highlights for me is that when people one of the things I just hope that the listeners of Uniquely Qualified will take away from pretty much every single episode is just make sure that when people share something with you that you have a kind response that is not about you. Because when I think about the kind of response that you're talking about anticipating from, I'm going to call it the infertility community,
Yeah.
that's about their own suffering, their own longing, their own investment of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars,
Yeah.
maybe, however
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Oh,
And
definitely hundreds of thousands. Yeah.
yeah, a lot of dollar signs there. And it's just, maybe just be kind and supportive.
100%. And
And
then look, I remember vividly
hmm
telling my sister-in-law after her miscarriage, like, and oh my God, I want to punch myself in the face. I've actually apologized to her since this, but like
mm-hmm.
something to the tune of like, this was all part of God's plan, which like pushed me down the stairs, because who says that to somebody who just lost their kid? Um, So, I mean, I am obviously just as guilty of being insensitive in somebody's time of grief. And after this whole experience, I actually like talked to her and was like, "Hey, I remember saying this. I don't know if you remember me saying this. I'm sure you do, but like I feel horrible and like I'm so so sorry." And she was like, "Oh my God, I've literally never thought about it again." But I mean, we're all guilty of doing it.
Yeah. And I'm glad, I appreciate you saying that and like giving an example of holding yourself accountable. I think that's a really cl important clarifying point because I feel like I bring this up every episode where it's like, don't say this, like I'm some sort of moral police, but really
We all say the wrong
it's
thing.
like because we are human do say
Totally.
the wrong thing and like you saying that to her I'm sure came from a place of like love and like I know that it's going to work out, this isn't God's plan,
It
we
was the
offer
worst.
things. Yeah, people aren't you I can't imagine that people are usually like I'm going to say this dickish thing to somebody who just experienced a tragedy. It's
Totally.
usually like I'm offering you what I think might be helpful. And I
Exactly.
think what I've just noticed about people who've lived through different kinds of traumas is that they're received by not the best, like the words are not the
Yeah,
right words.
I've done it a million times. We all have. And is she in need? Okay, all right. Do you mind if I nurse her?
Yeah, not at all. Let's
No.
take a quick break so you can
Yeah,
transition and
great.
get baby ready. All right. Ashlee and I are back from our break, and I was kind of fumbling through some words about how we just want to embrace people in our lives with kindness, and that sometimes we say things that are well intentioned, but they don't always come across that way. And so I was just trying to explain to listeners, I'm not trying to like be a morality police or a tone police, but just to say like maybe pause before you say something to somebody else. So,
And if you don't pause and you say something stupid, that like we've all done it, and then
right.
we just apologize.
All of us, exactly. And
Yeah.
you were the perfect example of realizing it later and then making
Oh,
amends to your
I still hate
sister-in-law.
myself for saying
Isn't
that.
that so
Because
cringy when you have
literally,
those moments?
she already told me it's okay,
Yeah,
and I
you're
still
forgiven. Right.
no, so 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 bad. Oh
No,
my gosh, Ashley.
we all have those things
No,
too. Like
no,
truly
I
we
hate
do. Where it's
myself.
like, oh, like and I wake up at 2 in the morning, I'm like, cringe, that
I know.
embarrassing thing I
It's
did that I
always
wake
at 2 a.m. too when you
right.
remember like something horrible that you said by
Yeah.
accident.
Exactly.
But that's so true, is that everyone is experiencing, even if it's the same journey that you think you had, their experience in that journey could be so different from yours. And people take everything in their own way and in their own stride. And I think that just having, I don't love to say the terms like hold space, because I think that's kind of cheesy, but like just making sure that you're keeping your perspective that, just because I felt this way or that way about, like, example, me feeling like IVF wasn't right for me does
Hmm.
not mean that I don't believe that it's right for everybody else. And like I said, I would walk across hot coals to make sure that, the next gal in line has access to that care. It's not the right thing for me. So I think, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a really important comment. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's see. So we already know that there is a beautiful daughter born a little bit
Yes.
early. Do
We
you
had a very happy ending.
very happy ending? And it sounds like you did not, you were a couple who didn't want to know the gender, or
Oh
did
no,
not
we
know.
did. We
Oh, you
did.
did. You
Yeah, we found
just
out.
that early when okay, got it. Because some couples don't know, don't find
I
out.
don't think I could have held it together. I think that like I needed to know that because all of it felt so like not real. And
Hmm.
I don't mean to say that I wasn't attached to my pregnancy, but I was so afraid that something was going to happen. It felt like too good to be true. Like there's no
Yeah.
way. Um,
Yeah.
I think that finding out that it was a girl like humanized it for me. And it was like she and her and like I could
Yeah.
we picked a name and then it was like it was real, like we had a baby. And I think
Hmm.
that at that point too, i I was like, all right, if something goes wrong, it's not that I like lost my pregnancy, it's that my daughter died. So like I'm like
Right.
humanizing this process, and I think that that made it so much more real for me.
Hmm.
I really then like really like leaned in and enjoyed it. So I
Oh,
think that
good.
I would never. I'm not a person who could not find out. Like I
Yeah.
needed because I needed to give her identity, and like that was super important to me. My cousin just had her second kid, did not find out the gender both times, and I'm like, I would love to have patience like that. I really wish I could because imagine that day comes and you're meeting
Right.
this person and you know nothing about them. You don't even know what gender they are, and I think that that would be the surprise of a lifetime, but your girl
Hmm.
way, way, way too impatient. There's no
Well,
way.
and it also makes sense to me, like in terms of what you were saying about not your words, but just how clinical everything had become. You're investing all this time and energy, and things are, it's forcing how you think about intimacy with your
Yep,
partner to
yep.
change. So now
Clinical's
it's
a
like, yeah, exactly. So, like, yeah, it makes sense to me where it's we want to find out the gender, and you're bringing that into more of
yeah,
like it's
like
less clinical. It's
humanized.
more of a
Yes, yeah, it's
exactly.
like a very sterile. Clinical is a perfect word. It's everything is like clockwork. You're a patient, right? And like
Hmm.
you're conceiving. Well, granted, now we did not conceive in the clinic, but most people who are walking this journey, they are making their baby either with someone else's hand inside of them or in a petri dish. Like it's not like this sexy, intimate. So like humanizing it, I think, is really important because to your point,
Yeah.
clinical is the perfect word. It's sterile, it's clinical. And then once that piece is behind you, like bringing like your human emotions and like a true sense of like family back into it. Oh, I think it was the
Hmm.
best part. So I wouldn't have changed it. I'm so glad we found out.
Oh yeah, I bet you were. Yeah, that just sounds
Oh, I was so excited.
really
I was
special and
convinced it was a boy.
exciting.
And then
Really?
I stayed convinced it was a boy. Then we did genetic testing. They said it's a
Hmm.
girl. And I'm like, well, with girl genetic testing, it can be wrong because
Oh really?
there, well, we didn't, we, you test the mom's blood and then
Okay.
in absence of male chromosomes, they determine it's a woman or it's
Okay.
a girl. But what if you don't have enough circulating chromosomes from the baby yet? That's a thing. And so they're just saying default. I'm like, I think it's a boy. I have this feeling that it's a boy. So we went in for our 20-week anatomy scan. They're like, nope, definitely a girl. I still kept for some reason kept like in my I'd be like catch myself, oh, little sweet little boy, and my husband would be like, bro, what are, and I'm like, I don't know why I keep saying this, like then I'm like subconsciously does my body know it's a boy and that's why I keep saying like my little man, or because I have a boy dog and like I'm so used to being like, oh, good boy.
Oh yeah.
uh, that's my husband. He's like, it's because you're just used to talking to Chewy. And I was like, no, dude, I think that this. So then we went in for like, I can't remember. It was like late in my third trimester. And I was like, can you just one more time make sure there's no penis? Just like real quick, just like, and they're like, I'm looking right now. Definitely not a boy. And I was like, okay, thank you. I just want, and then she came out and my husband was like, don't worry, she's a girl. And I'm like, all right.
Oh,
I wouldn't have cared either way, but I like needed to prepare in my brain.
that
Yeah.
totally makes sense.
Yeah. So we found out early. And then the birth came.
Hmm.
Do we have time to talk about birth trauma? Not
Yeah.
super. I didn't have a super traumatic birth, but
Yeah, to the extent that you want to talk about, I think that it's something that I really want to make sure that we normalize because, um, as discussed on an earlier episode, as you and I discussed pre-show, 45% of births in the United States have a level of trauma to them. So, to, yeah, to the extent that you want to share about what happened.
my birth was not super traumatic. I mean, and I say that with like I think I went into it with a super open mind.
Hmm.
I was so terrified during my pregnancy that something was going to go wrong. Toward the end, I started having dreams that I had a stillbirth, recurring,
Yeah,
like every night. I'd wake up in like a cold sweat and like, oh my God, I didn't feel the baby kick. Something has
so
happened.
scary. Yeah.
Um, so I basically told my doctor, like, hey, I'm 100% following your lead here. My birth plan, I actually wrote one, and it literally
Mhm.
said, like, mom, dad, and baby go home alive together. That was,
Yeah.
however
Yep.
that happens, I'm cool with it. So I tried to go into it super open minded, but I also tried to do all the things. So 30 weeks, I started going to a pelvic floor therapist and preparing to learn how to push and doing perineal massages. And I tried to do all the things to prepare my body for birth. And I was not to say dead set, but like obviously I wanted to have a vaginal delivery. I wanted to do it naturally. I didn't want to do drugs. But all of these goals were malleable so long as my baby was okay and I was okay.
Hmm.
I mentioned that my water broke early. I was at a friend's concert and for a friend's band and with all of my girlfriends and their husbands. And I'm like, oh, I don't feel very well. And they're all like, oh, dude, she's in labor. Like and I'm
Yeah.
like, I've never had a kid. So I'm like, no, 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 no. I'm just like having some lower back pain. All the women sitting around the table are all moms. And they're like, she's definitely having a baby right now.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so my husband pulls up the car. I end up actually being in labor. So my water broke at 38 weeks and 6 days. And I got to the hospital and I'm like, amazing. My contractions are feeling pretty close. I bet I'm like 6 centimeters. I was not dilated at all, like 0 centimeters.
Oh.
Um, so they're like, all right, well, we're going to let you labor for a little while, hang tight. It could be however long, your body decides to take. So they come back and check me at like 5, 6 hours later. I'm still 0 centimeters. And they're like, all right,
Oh.
well, now that your water has broken, and I'm sure there are people out there that are going to hate a lot of the stuff that I'm saying because I know there are visceral reactions to, OB and midwifery advice. But, just given my involvement with the medical community and my dad being a doctor, like
Yeah.
I was going to take the advice of my medical team. I was not in a state at that point to like advocate for not doing cervical checks or anything. I'm like, you know what? You do what you have to do. Again, goal is baby stays alive.
Yeah.
So, and I love my OB and I trust her so much. So she
Hmm.
comes in at this point, and this is the first time I saw her. It was like nurses before that. And she was like, how are you? Like, what do you want to do? How are you feeling? And I was like, well, I still really don't want any drugs. I want to try to do this the best that I can. And she's like, all right, well, that's totally fine. We'll hang off a little bit. So she gives me like another couple hours and then she comes back and she's like, look, here's the deal. I'm going to do whatever you want to do. But as you approach 24 hours post your water breaking, you are at an increased risk of the baby getting an infection and you
Yeah.
getting an infection. And so that's
Hmm.
just something to bear in mind. We will continue taking your temperature and we can do IV antibiotics if you want to continue laboring past that. That is your choice. And I was like, okay, like that's great. She's like, but something to consider, we can try to, it's not an induction because you're already in labor, but I can't remember if they called it like goodness, I don't remember the word that they used, but like we can alter it or something like that. We can give
Okay.
you some drugs to help speed it along. And I was like, all right, well, at this point I've already been in labor for like 10 hours and nothing has happened. Like I am 0 centimeters dilated, but I'm having pretty strong contractions. So I'm like, all right, I didn't want Pitocin, but here we are. I couldn't do the balloon. I couldn't do the Cytotec. So all the other things that were in the potential birth plan, I couldn't do because my water was already broken. So the only thing that I really could do to modify what was happening was Pitocin. Well, that's not true. I didn't have a epidural, so I was getting up. I was sitting on the ball. I was on the dilation station, like sitting backwards on the toilet. I was doing all the things that the pelvic floor therapist had taught me how to do, and I still was not progressing. So they start me on Pitocin, and we're going, and we're going, and I'm 0 centimeters, and we're going, and we're going. And I mean, we got to 16 units of Pitocin, 0 centimeters. So by this point, we're, I think, like approaching like 19 hours in labor with like 16 units of Pitocin. And they're like, we can't really go much further with the Pitocin. So my OB comes in and does a cervical sweep or rupture of membranes or something like that. And it was awfully painful. And I was like, all right, I'm starting like my pain threshold at this point is like I'm starting to tap out. Like we're approaching 20 hours. I have no drugs. I'm losing my mind.
Mm.
So I still I still didn't want to get an epidural because they put the fear of God in you with the epidural that like, oh, it's going to slow down your progression, and I'm already moving really slowly. So I'm like, well, this is not the right time.
Oh, okay.
So my hospital offers nitric oxide. So I used that and that helped a lot and got me like past the hump probably into like 20, 21 hours.
Mm.
And then baby started having a really bad reaction to the Pitocin. And
Oh,
we started getting like some pretty low dips in her heart rate. And I, at this point, am like hysterical because I'm like, okay,
yeah.
like, why am I failing? Like, why is my body failing me?
Mm.
And they gave me the option to keep laboring. But they said, here's the deal. If we let you keep going, and baby is not handling the Pitocin very well, there is a higher likely, and they're like all the way, they are give informed consent. They're asking me what I want to do. So like
Yeah.
I don't have like the trauma of like being forced to do something one way or another. They said, if you want to keep going, we would recommend that you get an epidural because if we do have to do an emergency C-section because baby's heart rate plummets, the timing isn't great for us to have to do a spinal on you.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's like they don't want to cut into you without any anesthetic, right? So if you
Whew.
already have the epidural, they can use that placed line with the anesthesiologist during the C-section. And I was like, all
Hmm.
right, fine. Twist my arm. By this point, I've been in labor for like 20 hours
Yeah.
with nothing but the nitric oxide. So I got the epidural, hated it. I don't know if there's any women out there that got it and thought that it was the most like I don't like Twilight Zoney feeling of like
Hmm.
being paralyzed. Like it is not a. I hated it. I absolutely hated it. So I have the epidural, and then that's probably from like hour 21 until like 24, 25. So at this point, I'm like accepting that like this isn't going to happen. I'm still 0 centimeters, by the way. I've never
Hmm.
progressed to a single centimeter.
Hmm.
They kept saying fingertip. Fingertip was my dilation status the entire time. So I can't figure out why my water broke, but it did. And so at like 20, I think it was like 25 or 26 hours, the doctor came in and she's so sweet. She like grabs my hand, like holding my hand, and she was like, I'm crying. And I'm like, why did I fail? Like, how come I couldn't do this? I mean, I had
Yeah.
this vision in my head, and she was like, you didn't fail. She's this sweet, sweet
So
old.
glad you said that.
She says, you didn't fail. Your body was ready. Baby was not. Like, it's okay. Or maybe
Oh,
the
yeah.
opposite. Maybe she said, baby was ready. Your body was not. I'm like, you know what? You're totally right. And she's like, remember what you said to me. Like, goal is to get baby out. And I was like,
Yep.
all I want right now is to hold my daughter, get her out of me. And so like I consented the whole way. So when I say like birth trauma, I mean, truthfully, I'm not holding on to it, but there is something to be said about like, you kind of hold it against yourself. Like, man, like
Yeah.
I already struggled to get pregnant. My body failed me then. And now I couldn't even give birth the way that I am supposed to be able to. And my body failed me now. And you feel like, I mean, I can't speak for anybody else, but I felt like I had failed. And
Hmm.
then there is a whole community out there, which like ladies out there, if you had a C-section, like don't go on the internet. Just like don't
Yeah.
tell. There is like a whole my best friend had a like, crash C-section with her twins at like 30 weeks. And she's like, oh, there are people out there that will tell you took the easy way out. You didn't actually give birth. They just took them out of you. You didn't give birth. I'm like, well, I have a baby and she came out of my body. So but there's
Yeah.
like a whole tribe of people out there that if you had a C-section, like it's like
Yeah.
it's the same as the infertility. Like you get into that dark mom like space on the internet and people have like tough opinions, man. Like
Yeah.
it's rough out there. So I just chose to not engage with those and
Yeah.
kind of stayed off the mom
Hmm.
blog.
I'm glad that, so I guess first of all, I'm really glad that you had informed consent. I'm so glad that the doctor assured you you are not a failure, you have not failed,
It's
that you were
awesome.
able to receive compassionate care like that, and yet you still can identify having had a traumatic birth. Like that's one thing I after Taylor's episode, I just want people to know that like no, like you get to define your trauma. And even if you're not
Totally.
defining it in the moment, and yes, there's like the scale of like people having like really, really messed up thing
Yeah.
Babies
No,
don't
my
live, moms
experience,
don't
yes,
live.
100%, 100%.
But it's still, and I don't know, like this is not founded on anything, but when I just think about like the amount of pain that a birthing mother must endure in their body, how can that not, like, there's part of me, I'm like, how is it only 45%? How is it not more? Because that is
I think
insane
it's
amounts of
intense.
trauma.
I
I
think
mean,
it's
pain,
intense
pain.
regardless of what
Hmm.
happened to you. And I guess like I don't want to throw around the word trauma because like it's not
Sure.
something that like and I have some friends, my sister included, who had exceedingly traumatic, needed to go to therapy to seek help. I mean, like life altering births. Mine
Yeah.
was nothing like that. I just mean to say that like if you are a woman out there and your birth didn't go your way and it didn't happen the way you expected and you felt like
Yeah.
you were robbed of an experience, like that's valid too. You don't need
Yes.
near death experience, and have this like novel worthy birth story to say like, you know what, my birth didn't go my way. I didn't like how it happened. I felt cared for. My birth team was amazing. My baby is alive. I am healthy. And yet somehow, I guess the way I can put it best is like I felt like I was robbed of the experience of like, this sounds silly. I wanted to push my baby out. Like I
Yes.
wanted to feel that moment of like bringing my child into this world and I didn't get to have that and that sucks. But I will reserve the word trauma. I certainly did not have, residual trauma from that and I totally want to respect that space for the women who did because I have a lot of women in
Yeah.
my life who had like truly traumatic, horrifying experiences where their practitioners did not advocate for them and they did not have informed consent and people were not looking out for their best interests. So, I'm very fortunate that
Hmm.
it worked out the way that it.
Yeah.
I wish it had gone differently. But,
Yeah.
baby and I hate that
Yeah.
we do that though. I hate that women as I'm saying it, well, it all turned out okay and like it's true, but you're still allowed to like as the person giving birth, you matter too. Like yes, the baby's healthy.
Yes, you do.
That's all that like truly matters, but like our experience matters too. So as much
Yes,
as I try to,
definitely does.
we all try to, you hear everyone saying, "Oh well, at least my baby's healthy," and that's
Hmm.
true. But I just, I would say that every woman's allowed to hold a little bit of compassion for herself and allow herself to
Definitely.
small pity party that it didn't work out the way we thought it would.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I just think about some of the women in my life who maybe they don't have like a little T or big T trauma, but like there was that unexpected part of the experience
Totally.
where ever since they were a little girl, they imagined breastfeeding.
Yes.
And that's just like not an option for them because of complications. Or they literally imagine that like the feeling of
Yep.
pushing their child into the world because that's what their mom did with them and they don't get that experience. And so you can be grateful and you can be disappointed at the same
100%.
time.
Thank you. That's the perfect way. The two things are not mutually exclusive. I'm glad you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned breastfeeding too, because that is something actually, if I had not been able to nurse, I don't know why. I built up breastfeeding in my brain. Like it was one of the things I looked forward to most about having a child. I
Mm-hmm.
was so eager to breastfeed and I was very paranoid that it wasn't going to work out. I can pretty confidently say that had I not been able to nurse, I think I would have held more trauma from that than like my birth alone. Like that would have
Yeah.
really fucked me up. I
Mm-hmm.
was like, and I have a lot of women in my life. My sister had a bilateral mastectomy. She had cancer when she was 16 years old, had
Oh my
no,
gosh.
I mean, it was a horrible story. Obviously, she's alive. We're very grateful. But
Yeah.
there are women out there that physically cannot breastfeed. I mean, that I can imagine, I can only imagine that that is a very difficult journey in and of itself. And
Mm-hmm.
just like the infertility world and the birth world, there's also a whole deep, dark breastfeeding world where
Yeah.
everyone does everything wrong all of the time and women are never right. It's very sad. I don't know if it was when we were on our break chatting or if we talked about it when we were on the podcast, but that like there are women supporting women. And the problem is that women are like, we are also our own enemies. Like the commentary that people make on these internet forums in the birth world, in the breastfeeding world. I mean, there's so much vitriol about breastfeeding and pumping and formula. And it feels like women can never get it right. I mean,
Yeah.
it's very unfortunate.
Yes, I'm glad that you brought that up. We were on break. Ashley and I were talking about how I'm so grateful to have this forum for women to support women by telling their stories like she's doing today. But that is one thing as I do my own independent research for each episode, but especially the ones that have like a medical component where I'm totally ignorant and I want to be a little more grounded and prepared for my guests. I have had to be so careful on social media, Ashley. Like for the episode about birth trauma, I was just like, well, let's just see what some of these accounts say. And I was shocked and
Yeah.
horrified at the judging, at like why do you think that's okay to say to somebody who just had a C-section and it saved both her and the baby's life? Like absolutely
Yep.
just horrible things. And so I'm hoping that we can like make
Yeah,
people
no,
more
no, no.
aware of like maybe don't do that. Maybe don't be that person on the internet.
I really hope, and as I was, when you invited me to do this podcast, part of me was like, well, like, I don't know if I'm the right voice to speak to infertility because I didn't do IVF and I didn't have this like insane experience of having 10 FETs or, 12 egg retrievals that didn't work out. Like that wasn't my experience. And so I don't know that
Mhm.
I'm like the right mouthpiece. And I was really concerned about that. And then I thought to myself, like, well, my story is still valid too. Like just
It
just
is.
because I didn't have the same experience as everybody else doesn't mean that it's any. So I think that my one of my girlfriends, Chelsea, will always whenever we're like exchanging stories, and I'll be like, oh, I had the worst week. And then like 4 minutes later, after I've just lamented about how awful my week is, she'll say something. I'm like, oh, my dog died. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm such an asshole. And she'll say, your week is not invalidated because like
Right.
whatever happened to you this week doesn't unhappen because something bad happened to me. Like these things can happen simultaneously. So
Hmm.
I think that
I love that.
it's important to remember that we're all entitled our own experiences, and they can affect us however they affect us, and that is okay. We don't
Yeah,
have to modulate our reactions to our world because it's not as bad as somebody else's.
exactly. And each person's experience is valid. And sometimes it's like a perspective shift happens where it doesn't need to like diminish your own or anybody's experience or suffering or what trauma, whatever it might be, but might be going, well, okay, that's another way this could have played out. Or, you know what, I'm gonna be grateful and feel sad. Just listening to each other and being heard by other people just seems like something that we're lacking in general. And it's part of what I'm hoping to facilitate here with our
You're doing
community.
awesome. I love it.
Thank you. I'm just so grateful that you're here. This
Yeah,
has
I'm
just
glad
been so great. And I know we're getting on towards dinner time, I would imagine, for you and your family. Do you mind if we transition to the last three questions that I ask
yeah.
every guest?
Yep, let's go for it.
All right, Ashley. So if you could go back to the start of your fertility journey, what would you say to that younger version of yourself?
Goodness. I think if I could go all the way to the very beginning, I would tell myself, and I think I've already said it while we were, now I'm not able to remember what I said while we were off, but
You're
um,
all good.
no one is coming to save you. You are
Mm,
the only one who is ever gonna be the fulfillment of your own story. Like no one cares as much as you do about your own happenings. So like advocate for yourself.
yes.
Don't be afraid to be the problematic patient. Don't be afraid to demand a test or answers or to keep digging deeper. I often question what this journey would have looked like if I didn't end up with Dr. Miller or I didn't end up with the tests, or it could have been very different. And maybe we would have moved into IVF and it would have been successful. I mean, no one can ever tell me or foresee what could have happened, but I regret nothing about advocating for myself except for that it took me like 2 or 3 years to figure out that the world is not as genuine as you want to believe that it is. Infertility treatment is $1 billion industry. They're going to take you for a ride if you let them. So,
Right.
dig your heels in, do your research, advocate for yourself because no one else is going to.
That's so great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Second question. What has been the most helpful tool or resource in navigating your particular set of challenges?
Mm, I there are a lot of great resources out there. This is like so cheesy, but my greatest resource was that I was very open about what was
Mm,
happening to me on Instagram, which is probably how Shannon hooked us up.
hmm.
I've been very open about what was happening on Instagram and Facebook, and anyone who would talk to me about it. Would tell a stranger on the subway my story. And I
Hmm.
think that because of that, I had people climbing out of the woodwork that I knew in middle school and high school and college, people who lived in my hometown that I had, was in a club once together in like middle school. So many people I met through, I mean, reconnected with, met through, and like you build your own little tribe. You be forthcoming with your immediate family members and friends that have not been through it and want to support you. There are a lot of obviously resources out there that you can seek, but I think that the best resources are like your immediate people, your village. And it's not
Yeah.
always the village that you had before. Sometimes it's a new village of people you reconnect with. But I think that the best resource I had was putting my story out there, having women who identified with what I was going through reach out to me and making those connections. I've made like good friends, like people who are on my Christmas card list now, like that's how you know that you
Yeah.
but a lot of people have come out, and I hold those friendships so, so dear to me now. And they're like a different type of friendship, it's almost like
Yeah.
a little sisterhood. So
I love that.
lean into the people who've been there. Use if you know someone who has been there, done that, talk to them, try to understand what they went through, listen to podcasts like this. And, I think that your village is, if you have one, if you don't, I will be your village.
Yeah.
If you don't have a village and you listen to this podcast, you connect with Liz and she will connect you with me and I will be your village.
Yes, ma'am.
Having someone to listen and troubleshoot is just, it's the best resource you can have.
Thank you. And also thank you for being so open and willing to adopt new members into
Always.
your community. I
It
love
can be a
that so
lonely,
much.
lonely place. So I am happy to do it.
Yeah. I love the generosity of spirit. It's just like that's good stuff of humanity.
Happy to.
All right, so last question. I think you kind of broached on this a little bit, but if you could say anything to someone out there who is relating to your story, what would you say to them?
You know, that is tough. So my knee-jerk reaction is to say don't give up, but I think that that is not right. I don't because I
Mm,
cause I don't want to. I want to make sure I say this right. I don't think giving up here. I don't think stepping away is giving up. I think that if you have been on the roller coaster long enough, it is okay to say, I'm done and I'm
mhm,
stepping away from this because it doesn't serve me anymore. My mental health is struggling. My marriage is struggling. I do not think that stepping away from infertility treatment is giving up in any way. So I hate that that was even my first gut feeling to say like, oh, don't give up. Because I think that's like some toxic positivity where people then think that
mm,
they have to choose to move on, that they are giving up. That's not true. So I just wanted to acknowledge that because for some reason I wanted to say it, and I think that that's the wrong thing. There were many times where I was ready to step away, and I didn't want that notion of like, oh well, I'm not in it to win it anymore. It's not like that. So I
yeah.
think that what I would say is like, I guess like listen to your intuition, prioritize yourself. You need to not lose yourself or your marriage or your financial stability. I mean, this is not cheap. So I think that reminding people that they're not alone and that this is hard and that it is
Hmm.
okay to make decisions that are best for you, even if those decisions don't result in your baby or what you thought that your life would look like. That sometimes you have to do what's best for you, and sometimes that's not continuing, and sometimes it is. So I think it would just be, leaning into your own intuition, being okay with prioritizing yourself, your own well being, your mental health, your physical health, your marriage, your financial stability, and understanding that sometimes like it's just not right at that
Hmm.
time, or not being too hard on yourself or expecting your journey to go a certain way.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely appreciate that. And I feel like, and I can cut this out if this doesn't back you up in the way that feels most supportive, but where the idea of giving up isn't like you trusted, like you were listening to the book of Job. You had such faith and you had such trust, and there
Yeah.
was an outcome that was exactly what you wanted. But sometimes giving up means like opening yourself up to a different possibility of what that might look like for you. And I'm hearing you say, listen to that and take care of yourself and honor that.
100%. And
Okay.
I've tried my best during this podcast to not get like too religious because I understand that that's like a very polarizing piece and I don't want to alienate listeners that are not religious. For me, I got to a place where I was like even if this doesn't go my way, like I know God is good. I know my life will be okay, and like I'm just gonna lean into what I'm feeling in the like I said, I stepped away when I bought my horse, and I was like, this is the summer of
Yeah.
Act. I'm gonna do something
Yes.
for myself, and I don't regret doing any of that. So exactly how you just put it. You don't need to edit that out. Definitely,
Okay.
but I
I'm
mean,
glad.
No, I think that that's very, very, very critical for especially women who are just getting into it and feel like they have to traverse down this path just the way that their doctor said, or that I have to do X, Y, and Z, and then I move from this pool to this pool. Like you don't have to do it the way that the book is written. Like it is a for-profit business. They are moving
That's
you.
right.
So you determine your own trajectory with what you feel comfortable with. You prioritize yourself, you keep yourself healthy, and you know, wherever that leads you, you kind of have to be willing to take it or not. That's a very, very, I didn't do that very well. So if I could,
Hmm.
I guess if you say if I could go back and tell myself another thing, it would be that. That is something that I wish I'd been kinder to myself.
It's a good reminder to all of us to be just kind to others, but also kind to ourselves.
Kind to ourselves, yes.
Yeah,
Kind, graceful, and loyal to ourselves. We are our
that's
own
right.
top of.
Yeah, that's right. Ashlee, thank you so much for being here. It has just been such a pleasure chatting with you today and learning about what you've overcome and just being willing to tell your story. So thank you so much.
Of course, Liz, I had so much fun chatting with you today. Honestly, I remembered a lot of things about this that I have like pushed way, way down in my little
Oh,
my little trauma box. So it was really cathartic to kind of talk through it, and I so appreciate you giving me some time and the space to air some of that old laundry. And again, if there's anybody out there that is walking through this alone, or a huge piece, and I know we didn't dive too much into this, but I know I did not experience this too badly, but there's a lot of stress that gets placed on your marriage. There's a lot of stress that is placed on your job. I also want to recognize that there are women that experience secondary infertility that have, a child and then are unable to conceive their second child, and it places stress on
oh.
the whole family. So there's a lot of stories that look very differently from mine that are just as important. And, I do encourage anybody that's walking through this alone, reach out to Liz. I'm not kidding. Like, reach out to Liz. Find me on Instagram. I am nursing a baby all night long, and I have nothing better than to just get on Instagram and ping with people and chat through this. I mean, you don't know how good it feels to like listen, to have someone listen to you and offer up just an ear. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's enough on
Yeah.
my end. But
I no, I appreciate, and that's my perfect segue into the sign off for this episode. So, listeners, if you don't already follow us, we are Uniquely Qualified Pod on Instagram, and then we're Uniquely Qualified on Spotify. So please follow us. If you're on Spotify and you like what you hear here, please follow us and I'd be honored with a 5-star review. If you're listening to this episode and there is somebody that's coming to mind for you, please share it with them. And again, if you want to connect with Ashlee, I can help facilitate that. There's two ways you could do that. One would be to direct message me on Instagram. I'll connect you with our girl. The podcast also has an email. It's uniquelyqualifiedpod@gmail.com. I'll get back to you in a couple days if you email me. And if you are also on a similar journey like Ashlee has been on, and you're thinking, you know what, I want to share my story. I think this could benefit other families, other people. I am always looking for new guests, so please reach out if you are interested in doing that as well. And with that, I would just like to thank everybody for their time and attention. And please remember that we are all uniquely qualified.